Silence had become Arya's most trusted companion. 5 years of solitude in her mountain cabin had taught her that silence wasn't the hollow void others feared. It was alive, full of bird song at dawn, wind whispering through ancient pines, and her own thoughts, finally healing after years of being told they didn't matter. In silence, she had found a sanctuary that the world of men and wolves had denied her. The morning broke with golden light streaming through her windows as Arya hung bundles of rosemary and sage from the rough-hewn beams of her cabin ceiling. Her alabaster hands worked with practiced precision, tying each bundle with twine, the herbs collected under the waning moon as her mother had taught her. Before everything had changed, before the fire, before the rejection. Her reflection caught in the small mirror by her workbench, white hair like fresh snow, skin pale as moonlight, and eyes the color of dawn sky with a hint of rose. An albino, a ghost, an aberration among the wolf clans who prize strength and conformity above all else. Her appearance alone had been enough for them to cast her out, whispering that her difference was an ill omen. But they had never seen what truly made her different. They never stayed long enough to witness how plants flourished under her touch, or how wounded creatures sought her out as if drawn by an invisible beacon. Arya secured the last bundle of herbs when she heard it, a sound that didn't belong in her peaceful forest. The baying of hounds, men's voices, rough and excited. Hunters. Her hands stilled on the rosemary she'd been tying. Hunters weren't unusual this time of year, but these voices had an edge to them, a cruelty that made the tiny wolf inside her press against her consciousness with warning. She moved to the window, careful to stay hidden behind the worn curtain. Through the glass, she could see nothing yet, but the sounds were growing closer. 5 years of living alone had taught her caution. She should bar the door, draw the shutters, and wait for them to pass. That was what she'd been doing for 5 years, hiding, surviving, staying invisible. But then another sound reached her ears, a whimper, low and pained, the unmistakable sound of an animal in distress. Arya closed her eyes, her fingers tightening on the windowsill. The healer in her, the part her mother had nurtured before flames had consumed their small cottage, and everyone in it except Arya, pulled her toward that sound. The survivor in her screamed to stay put, to not risk exposure. "I am my mother's daughter," she whispered to herself, the words a prayer and a promise. Decision made, she grabbed her leather satchel already packed with healing supplies, bandages, salves, needle and thread, and herbs for pain and infection. She threw on her worn cloak, pulling the hood low over her distinctive hair, and slipped out the back door of her cabin. The forest welcomed her as it always did, branches seeming to part for her passage, the undergrowth quieting beneath her feet. Arya moved with the silence of one who had learned to belong to the wild, following the pained sounds that grew more desperate with each passing moment. The men's voices grew louder too. "It can't have gone far, not with 3 arrows in it, silver-tipped too. That pelt is mine. Worth a king's ransom, that one. Biggest wolf I've ever seen." "Not just any wolf, you saw those eyes. That's one of them. The shapeshifters, the ones that look like men." Arya's blood turned cold at the words. These weren't ordinary hunters pursuing game for food. These were men who knew about werewolves, men who hunted them specifically. The blood and silver war. That's what her mother had called the ancient conflict between humans and werewolves. A war that had supposedly ended generations ago with an uneasy peace. But some, it seemed, still carried the old hatred. When she finally found the source of the whimpering, Arya's breath caught in her throat. There, dragging itself across the forest floor, was a wolf of impossible size. Its fur was silver white, now matted with blood where 3 arrows protruded from its side. One back leg twisted at an unnatural angle. It was easily twice the size of any natural wolf she'd ever seen, its shoulders reaching what would be her waist if it stood at full height. Behind it, the forest floor was stained dark with a trail of blood, a trail leading straight to the wounded creature, and beyond that, to her cabin. The wolf's massive head lifted at her approach. Eyes the color of molten gold met hers, and Arya felt a jolt of recognition pass through her body. Those weren't the eyes of a beast. They held wisdom, pain, and something else, a weariness that spoke of centuries rather than years. The wolf growled, a warning sound, but it was weak, dying. Arya didn't hesitate. She dropped to her knees beside the magnificent creature. "I'm going to help you," she whispered, extending her hand slowly. "But you need to trust me. Can you walk, even a little?" The wolf stared at her, and she witnessed the moment something shifted in that golden gaze. Recognition, perhaps, or just desperation. It struggled to its feet, swaying dangerously, and Arya caught its massive body before it could collapse again. "Come on," she urged, wrapping her arm around its barrel chest, taking as much weight as she could. The wolf was enormously heavy, and she was small, even for a woman. But Arya had always been stronger than she looked. Her mother used to say it was because she had to be, that the moon goddess gave extra strength to those who would face extra hardship. They moved painfully slowly through the trees. The baying of hounds grew louder. The hunters were following the blood trail, their voices excited as they discussed the value of their prize. Arya's cabin was only a quarter-mile away, but with the wolf's injuries, it might as well have been 10 miles. "Almost there," she whispered, as much to herself as to the wolf. "You're doing well. Just a little further." The wolf stumbled, nearly taking her down with its weight. But Arya held firm, muscles straining beyond what should have been possible for her frame. She felt something stir within her, a power she'd felt only glimpses of before, usually when treating the most grievously wounded creatures that found their way to her door. When they finally reached her cabin, Arya practically dragged the wolf inside, leaving a trail of blood that made her heart sink. The hunters would see it. They would know she'd taken their prey. But there was no time to worry about that now. She settled the wolf on the rug before her fireplace and hurried back outside. Working quickly, she covered the blood trail as best she could with dirt and fallen leaves. Her hands trembled as she worked, knowing it was likely futile but having to try anyway. Back inside, she barred the door, checked all windows, and turned her attention to her patient. The wolf's breathing was labored, its magnificent coat soaked with sweat and blood. "I need to remove these arrows," she told it, looking directly into those intelligent eyes. "It will hurt, but I'll be as gentle as I can." To her astonishment, the wolf gave what appeared to be a nod of understanding. Arya set to work, gathering her supplies. She prepared a poultice of yarrow to slow the bleeding, white willow bark for pain, and a needle and thread for stitching. Working methodically, as her mother had taught her, she first cut away the arrow's shafts, leaving only the heads embedded in the wolf's flesh. "The heads are barbed," she explained, keeping up a steady stream of soft words to both soothe the wolf and herself. "I'll have to push them through rather than pull them out. Ready?" The wolf's eyes never left her face as she worked. With careful hands, she pushed the first arrowhead through, then the second, then the third, each emerging from the other side of the wound where she could grasp it with cloth-wrapped fingers and pull it free. The wolf made no sound beyond a soft whine, its stoicism remarkable for the pain it must be enduring. The last arrow was the worst. Its tip gleamed silver in the light from her windows. Silver, the metal that could kill a werewolf. No wonder the hunters had been so confident of their prize. "Almost done," she promised, working swiftly now as the wolf's breathing grew more labored. She applied her poultices to the wounds, binding them with strips of clean linen. The broken leg would need to be set, but first she needed to deal with the immediate threat of the silver poisoning. From a locked chest beneath her bed, Arya retrieved a small vial of liquid so dark blue it was almost black. Midnight tears, her mother had called them. Tears shed by the moon goddess for her children when they were hunted. Whether the story was true or merely a comforting tale, the remedy worked against silver poisoning. It was rare and precious. This was the last of what her mother had left her. "Drink," she urged, carefully tipping the vial against the wolf's muzzle. To her relief, it lapped at the liquid, swallowing it all. Loud knocking at her door made Arya freeze. "Open up! We're tracking a wounded animal. Trail leads right to your door." Arya's heart pounded in her chest. She glanced at the wolf, who was now trying to rise, a growl building in its throat despite its weakness. "Stay hidden," she whispered, guiding the massive creature behind her sofa. "Please, trust me." Another round of pounding on her door. "We know you're in there! Open up or we'll break it down!" Arya took a deep breath, checked that the wolf was hidden from immediate view, and opened the door just a crack. 3 men stood on her porch. They were rough-looking, with the kind of faces that suggested they enjoyed causing pain. The leader, a tall man with silver at his temples and the bearing of nobility, was dressed too finely for a simple hunter. His clothes were expensive, his posture aristocratic, but his eyes were cold and empty, the eyes of a predator in human form. "Well, well," he said, his gaze traveling over her white hair, pale skin, and unusual eyes. "What do we have here? An albino living all alone out here in the mountains." His voice held cultured tones that did nothing to mask the cruelty beneath. "That's dangerous, my dear. All kinds of unfortunate accidents could befall a woman like you, so isolated." Arya forced herself to meet his gaze steadily, though every instinct screamed at her to slam the door. "I haven't seen any wounded animals, just me and my herb garden." "Is that so?" The man pushed against the door, and Arya was forced to step back or be knocked over. He entered her cabin as if he owned it, the other two men following close behind, their eyes scanning her small home with predatory interest. "Because we tracked a wolf right to your door," the leader continued, moving through her cabin with slow, deliberate steps. "A very special wolf, silver-white coat, unusually large, worth a fortune to the right buyer." "I don't know what you're talking about," Arya said, keeping her voice level despite the fear crawling up her spine. "I've been inside all morning working on my remedies." The leader turned to her, his smile never reaching his eyes. "Allow me to introduce myself, Lord Darius, at your service." He gave a mocking bow. "And you are?" "Arya," she replied, offering nothing more. "No family name, no clan?" Lord Darius raised an eyebrow. "How unusual." "Just Arya, and I'd appreciate it if you'd leave. I have work to do." Lord Darius ignored her request, signaling instead for his men to search her cabin. They moved through the space with rough, careless hands, overturning furniture and rifling through her belongings. One of the men picked up a delicate glass vial, a keepsake from her mother, and deliberately let it fall from his fingers. It shattered on the wooden floor, the sound like ice breaking in Arya's heart. "Oops," the man said with a grin that showed tobacco-stained teeth. "Clumsy me." He ground the broken glass under his boot, destroying the last physical reminder Arya had of her mother's workshop. Arya bit her tongue until she tasted blood, fighting the urge to react. The wolf was right there, hidden behind her sofa, bleeding and vulnerable. If they found him, they'd kill him, and probably her as well for hiding him. The way these men moved through her space with entitled aggression made it clear they didn't see her as a person deserving of respect. Lord Darius stopped in front of the sofa, his head tilting like a predator sensing prey. "What's behind here?" "Storage," Arya said quickly, proud that her voice didn't shake. "Just old blankets and winter supplies. I keep them there because the mice can't reach that spot." He reached for the sofa, his hand already gripping the edge to move it, and Arya knew she was about to be caught. Her mind raced, trying to think of something, anything to distract them. But then from outside came the sound of hounds howling frantically. A different trail, fresh prey. "Boss!" called one of the men from the doorway. "The dog's found something, sounds big." Lord Darius hesitated, greed warring with suspicion. He looked between the sofa and the door, his jaw working as he calculated his options. Finally, the promise of a new hunt won out. "We'll continue this conversation another time," he said to Arya, his eyes cold with promise. He leaned in close, his breath hot against her face. "And if I find out you've lied to me, if you've got my prize hidden here somewhere, well—" His gaze traveled the length of her body in a way that made her skin crawl. "A pretty little ghost like you, all alone out here. No one would hear you scream." He turned and left, his men following reluctantly behind. Through the window, Arya watched them mount their horses and ride off in the direction their hounds had indicated. Only when they were out of sight did she allow herself to breathe again, her legs finally giving out as she slumped to the floor. She had faced many dangers in her years alone, but something about Lord Darius had chilled her to the bone. This wasn't just a hunter pursuing game. This was a man who enjoyed the suffering of others. A soft whine from behind the sofa reminded her of her patient. Arya pushed herself to her feet and hurried to the wolf's side. The massive creature was lying still, but its golden eyes were alert, watching her with an intensity that was almost human. To her amazement, the bleeding had slowed considerably, and the wounds already looked days old rather than fresh. The midnight tears were working their magic. "They're gone," she told the wolf, running gentle fingers through its silver-white fur. "But they'll be back. That man, Lord Darius, he knows what you are, and he won't stop until he finds you." Arya worked into the evening, setting the wolf's broken leg, cleaning its wounds again, and making sure it had water to drink. As night fell, she built up the fire to keep the cabin warm. The wolf watched her every move, its golden eyes reflecting the firelight. "You should rest," she told it as she prepared a simple meal for herself. "Healing takes energy, even with help." To her surprise, the wolf seemed to understand, laying its massive head on its paws and closing its eyes. Arya watched as its breathing deepened and evened out. Only when she was sure it was truly asleep did she allow herself to relax slightly. She ate her meal in silence, her mind racing with questions. Lord Darius had known the wolf was a shapeshifter. He had hunted it specifically, using silver-tipped arrows. This wasn't a chance encounter. It was targeted. And what about the wolf itself? It was clearly no ordinary animal, not just because of its size, but because of the intelligence in those golden eyes. It had understood her, had cooperated with her treatment, had trusted her when it had every reason to fear humans. Outside her window, the moon rose, nearly full and bright enough to cast shadows across her cabin floor. Arya felt drawn to its light as she always did. The moon had been her companion through the lonely years, the one constant in a life of upheaval and loss. She found herself humming softly, an old lullaby her mother used to sing, a song about the moon goddess and her children who ran on 4 legs by night and 2 by day. As a child, Arya had thought it simply a pretty tale. Now she wondered if there had been more truth to her mother's stories than she'd realized. Sleep claimed her eventually, curled in her chair by the fire, the wolf's soft breathing a strangely comforting sound in her usually silent cabin. She woke hours later to the sensation of being watched. The fire had burned down to embers, casting the cabin in deep shadows. But there was enough moonlight streaming through the windows for Arya to see that she was no longer alone with a wolf. Standing before her fireplace was a man, tall and powerfully built, with silver-white hair that fell to his shoulders and a short beard of the same color. He was wrapped in one of her blankets, but she could see that beneath it, his torso was bare, revealing muscled shoulders and arms marked with old scars, the kind that spoke of countless battles survived. And his eyes. Even in the dim light, she could see they were the exact same shade of gold as the wolf's had been. Arya didn't scream. She didn't run. Something in her had been expecting this moment from the first time those intelligent eyes had met hers in the forest. "You're a werewolf," she said simply, her voice steady despite the pounding of her heart. The man inclined his head, the gesture somehow both regal and respectful. "And you," he replied, his voice deep and resonant, "are a healer with power in your hands that you don't yet understand." Arya sat up straighter, studying him more carefully. He moved with care, obviously still in pain from his injuries, but there was nothing weak or vulnerable about him now. Despite his wounds, despite standing in a stranger's cabin wrapped only in a blanket, he radiated authority and power. "What's your name?" she asked. "Alaric," he answered after a moment's hesitation, as if deciding how much to reveal. "And you are Arya, the albino healer who lives alone in the mountains, the one they whisper about in the villages." "They whisper about me?" "They say you're a witch, that animals follow your commands, that the sick are healed by your touch." His golden eyes gleamed in the moonlight. "Some say you're a ghost, the spirit of a girl who died in these mountains long ago." Arya couldn't help the small smile that curved her lips. "And what do you say?" "I say you're the reason I'm still alive, when by all rights I should be dead 3 times over." He moved closer, his movements careful but graceful despite his injuries. "Those arrows were meant to kill. Not just any werewolf, but me specifically." "Who are you really?" Arya asked, sensing there was much more to this stranger than he had revealed. "Why would someone hunt you specifically?" Alaric was quiet for a long moment, his gaze moving to the window where the nearly full moon hung bright in the sky. Was, a hunter of sorts myself. Those men, they've been killing my kind. Not for food, not for protection, but for sport and profit. I was tracking them when they turned the tables on me." It wasn't a complete answer, Arya knew, but it was likely all she would get for now. Trust was not easily given by those who had survived as long as this man clearly had. "The one who led them, Lord Darius," she said. "He's not just a hunter, is he?" Alaric's expression darkened, a growl rumbling in his chest that was pure wolf despite his human form. "No, he is much more dangerous than that. He is a man who once knew what it meant to run with the pack and who turned against his own kind. The implication sent a chill down Arya's spine. He's a werewolf too? He was, Alaric confirmed, his voice heavy with something like ancient grief. Now he is something else, something broken and filled with hatred. Arya rose from her chair and moved to her workbench, lighting a lamp to better see her patient. I need to check your wounds, she said, practical concerns taking precedence over the mysteries surrounding her unexpected guest. Alaric hesitated, then nodded, allowing the blanket to drop enough for her to examine the arrow wounds on his side. To her amazement, they were already half-healed, the skin knitting together before her eyes. Your healing abilities are remarkable, she murmured, gentle fingers probing the wounds. I've never seen anything like it. It's not just my abilities, Alaric said, watching her closely. It's yours as well. Arya looked up, startled. Mine? I only use my usual remedies. No, Alaric said softly. There was more. When you touched me, your hands glowed with moonlight. Didn't you see it? That's impossible, Arya whispered, though even as she denied it, something deep inside her recognized the truth in his words. She had always healed better than she should have been able to, had always had a connection to animals that went beyond normal understanding. Not impossible, Alaric countered. Rare. So rare that most believe your kind no longer exist. My kind? I don't understand. Alaric reached out, his large hand gently brushing a strand of white hair from her face. The touch sent a current of warmth through her body. The Silver Moon lineage, he said, his voice almost reverent. Healers who could create sanctuaries where the wounded could find safety and restoration. They were thought to have died out in the Great Purge 20 years ago. 20 years ago, when Arya had been just a child, when fire had taken her family and her home, leaving her the sole survivor. She had always assumed it was a tragic accident, or perhaps the work of fearful villagers who saw her difference as a threat. You think I'm one of these Silver Moon healers? She asked, her voice unsteady. I know it, Alaric replied with absolute certainty. I've been hunting for one of your lineage for years, following rumors and whispers. When I heard tales of an albino healer in these mountains, I dared to hope, but then Darius and his Black Guard found me first. The Black Guard. The name sent another chill through Arya. It spoke of organization, of purpose beyond simple hunting, of a threat far greater than she had imagined. Alaric swayed suddenly, his face going pale with pain. Despite his remarkable healing, he had lost a lot of blood and endured severe trauma. You need to rest, Arya said firmly, guiding him to her bed in the corner of the cabin. We can talk more in the morning. To her surprise, Alaric didn't argue. He allowed her to help him to the bed, where he sank down with a barely suppressed groan of pain. His golden eyes held hers for a long moment. Thank you, he said simply, the words carrying the weight of a life debt. You're welcome, Arya replied softly. Now rest. She returned to her chair by the fire, wrapping herself in a blanket against the night's chill. Sleep was unlikely to return, not with her mind racing with all she had learned. The Silver Moon lineage, the Black Guard, Lord Darius, once a werewolf, now a hunter of his own kind, and Alaric, a werewolf who had been hunting specifically for someone like her. For what purpose, she still didn't know. Outside, the night was quiet again, but Arya sensed it was the quiet before a storm. Her peaceful existence had been shattered, and somehow she knew it would never be the same again. As dawn approached, she moved to the window, watching as the first light of morning touched the treetops. Something caught her eye, movement at the edge of the forest. She tensed, fearing the return of the Black Guard. But it wasn't men who emerged from the trees. It was wolves. 3 of them, wild wolves, not werewolves from their size and manner. They padded into the clearing before her cabin and sat, as if standing guard. Behind her, Alaric's deep voice came from the bed. They sense it beginning. Arya turned to find him watching her, his golden eyes reflecting the dawn light. Sense what? The sanctuary, he replied, his gaze moving to the wolves outside. Your power is awakening, Arya of the Silver Moon, and the forest knows it. Arya looked back at the wolves, a strange feeling of recognition flowing through her. She had always had a way with animals, but this was different. These wild creatures had come to her cabin not seeking help, but offering protection. Who are you really? She asked again, turning back to Alaric. Why were you looking for someone like me? Alaric sat up slowly, his movements careful but stronger than they had been the night before. In the morning light, Arya could see more clearly the network of old scars that covered his body, not just the marks of battles, but what looked like ritual scarring as well. Symbols of rank and power among the wolf clans, if her mother's stories were to be believed. "I am a guardian," he said finally, "one of the last of the old ways, and I sought you because of a prophecy as old as the Blood and Silver War itself. When the last silver blood returns, balance shall be restored." The words hung in the air between them, heavy with meaning Arya could sense but not yet fully understand. But before she could ask more questions, a sound reached them both, the distant baying of hounds once more. The Black Guard was returning, and this time they wouldn't be so easily turned away. Alaric rose from the bed, his face grim. "They've picked up my scent again. I need to lead them away from here." "You're not strong enough yet," Arya protested, moving to block his path to the door. "And besides, they've already seen me. They know I lied about helping you. I'm involved now whether I want to be or not." "You don't understand the danger," Alaric growled, frustration evident in his voice. "Darius doesn't just want my pelt for a trophy. He wants to eliminate all of the old bloodlines, and if he discovers what you are, then we face him together," Arya interrupted, a new resolve hardening within her. 5 years she had hidden in these mountains, afraid of the world and its cruelty. 5 years of solitude and survival and little else. Perhaps it was time to stop hiding. Alaric stared at her, surprise and something like respect dawning in his golden eyes. "You're braver than you know," he said softly. "Or more foolish," Arya replied with a grim smile. "But I'm tired of running from who I am, even if I don't fully understand it yet." Outside, the wolves began to howl, a warning. The Black Guard was getting closer. Arya moved quickly around her cabin, gathering supplies, herbs, bandages, her small knife. "We need a plan," she said as she worked. "I know these mountains better than they do. There are caves to the north where we could hide, places only the locals know about." Alaric shook his head. "We don't run," he said, his voice taking on the unmistakable tone of command. "We make a stand, here, now, before Darius can gather more men or more weapons." "That's madness," Arya argued. "There are at least 3 of them, and they're armed. You're injured, and I'm—" She broke off, unsure how to define herself. A healer, yes, but what else? What power did she truly have? "You are of the Silver Moon lineage," Alaric said firmly, "and I am far more than I appear, even wounded as I am." Before Arya could argue further, the sound of horses approaching reached them. Through the window, she could see Lord Darius and his men riding into the clearing, their hounds straining at their leashes. Time had run out. Alaric moved to the door, his bearing suddenly regal despite his injuries and state of undress. "Stay behind me," he ordered. "Wait," Arya said, grabbing her cloak and throwing it over his shoulders. It was far too small for his frame, but at least it provided some covering. "Whatever you're planning, don't get yourself killed. I didn't save you just to watch you die on my doorstep." A ghost of a smile touched Alaric's lips. "I have no intention of dying today, healer." He reached out, his large hand gently touching her face in a gesture that felt strangely intimate. "And neither will you. That I swear by the moon and my honor." With that, he opened the door and stepped out onto the porch to face Lord Darius and the Black Guard. Arya followed, her heart pounding, but her resolve firm. Whatever came next, she would no longer hide from it. It was time to discover who she truly was, this last daughter of the Silver Moon lineage, with power glowing in her hands and wolves coming to her call. Lord Darius reined his horse to a stop, his cold eyes widening in momentary surprise at the sight of Alaric standing on the porch. Then a slow, cruel smile spread across his aristocratic features. "Well, well," he said, his voice carrying across the clearing. "The great Alaric, wounded and at bay, how the mighty have fallen." Alaric stood tall despite his injuries, his presence somehow filling the space around him. "Darius," he acknowledged, his voice colder than mountain snow. "Still hunting your own kind, I see. How far you have strayed from the path." "My own kind?" Darius laughed, the sound devoid of humor. "I shed that limitation long ago, brother. Unlike you, clinging to old ways and dying prophecies." "Brother?" The word hung in the air between the 2 men, charged with history and betrayal. Arya felt the weight of it, the echo of a bond once strong, now twisted into hatred. "The old ways have wisdom you've forgotten," Alaric replied steadily. "And prophecies have power you'd be wise not to dismiss." Darius's gaze shifted to Arya, standing slightly behind Alaric. His eyes narrowed as he studied her white hair, her pale skin, her unusual eyes. "So the rumors are true," he said softly. "A silver moon still walks among us, the last of her kind." "Leave her out of this," Alaric growled, the sound rumbling from deep in his chest. "This is between you and me." "Oh, it's far too late for that," Darius replied, dismounting from his horse with fluid grace. "She made herself part of this the moment she hid you from my hunters." He signaled to his men, who spread out surrounding the cabin. "And now I have not one but two prizes. The great Alaric, self-proclaimed guardian of the old ways, and a silver moon healer thought to be extinct." He drew a blade from his belt, silver, gleaming in the morning light. "The bounty for your head alone would set me up for life, brother. But the two of you together?" His smile widened. "That will make me a legend." Arya felt fear twist in her stomach, but alongside it, something else was growing. A power she had only glimpsed before, now rising within her like a tide. She could feel it in her blood, in her bones, in the very air around her. The wild wolves at the edge of the clearing began to growl, their hackles rising as they sensed the threat to her. More shapes emerged from the forest, deer, foxes, even birds gathering in the trees, as if drawn by an invisible call. Lord Darius noticed, his confident expression faltering for the first time. "What is this?" he demanded, looking around at the gathering creatures. "The beginning," Alaric said, his voice resonant with certainty. "Just as was foretold. When the last silver blood returns, balance shall be restored." "Superstitious nonsense," Darius spat, but uncertainty had crept into his voice. "Kill them both," he ordered his men, "and then we'll deal with these beasts." The men raised their weapons, crossbows with silver-tipped bolts. Arya felt time slow around her as the power surged through her body. Without conscious thought, she stepped forward, placing herself at Alaric's side rather than behind him. "No," she said, the word carrying more force than she had intended. "You will not harm him. You will not harm any creature here." She raised her hands, and to her astonishment, they glowed with silver light, the same color as the moon, but warm instead of cold, living instead of distant. The light spread from her hands, forming a barrier between them and the Black Guard. Lord Darius's men fired their crossbows, but the bolts stopped mid-air, caught in the silver light before falling harmlessly to the ground. "What is this witchcraft?" one of the men cried, fear replacing the cruelty in his face. "Not witchcraft," Alaric said, his voice proud. "Sanctuary. The power of the Silver Moon lineage, a power your master once swore to protect before he betrayed his oath and his blood." Darius's face contorted with rage. "You know nothing of why I did what I did," he snarled. "You, sitting in judgment from your high position, never having lost everything that mattered." "I know more of loss than you can imagine, brother," Alaric replied, his voice heavy with ancient grief. "But I did not let it poison me as you have done." The silver light around Arya grew stronger, spreading outward to encompass the entire clearing. Where it touched the ground, small flowers began to bloom, out of season and impossibly vibrant. "This is your only warning," Arya said, her voice steady despite the storm of power raging through her. "Leave this place. Leave us in peace." For a moment, it seemed Lord Darius might heed the warning. Uncertainty flickered across his aristocratic features as he witnessed a power that had passed into legend. But then his expression hardened once more. "This isn't over," he said, his voice cold with promise. "The Black Guard does not surrender its prey so easily, especially not when that prey is the so-called King of Wolves and the last Silver Moon healer." King of Wolves! The title rang in Arya's ears, a final piece clicking into place. She turned to look at Alaric, seeing him truly for the first time. Not just a werewolf, not just a guardian, but royalty among his kind. Darius mounted his horse, his movements fluid despite his barely contained rage. "We will return," he promised. "With weapons even your sanctuary cannot stop. Enjoy your reprieve while it lasts." He turned to his men. "Fall back." The Black Guard retreated, disappearing into the forest with their hounds, but Arya had no doubt they would return, just as Darius had promised. As the silver light faded, Arya felt her strength go with it. Her knees buckled, and she would have fallen if Alaric hadn't caught her, his strong arms supporting her weight. "What was that?" she asked, her voice faint with exhaustion. "What did I do?" "You created a sanctuary," Alaric replied, his golden eyes filled with wonder and respect. the first true sanctuary seen in these lands for 20 years, since the Great Purge. He helped her back into the cabin, setting her gently in her chair by the fire. The wild wolves followed, entering the cabin as if it were the most natural thing in the world. They settled around her feet, protective guardians now bound to her power. "You called me the King of Wolves," Alaric said after a long moment of silence. "Why?" "I didn't," Arya replied, looking up at him. "Lord Darius did, and from the way you reacted, I'm guessing it's true." Alaric held her gaze, then inclined his head in acknowledgement. "It is one of my titles, yes. Among the 5 territories, I am known as King Alaric, guardian of the old ways, protector of the pack." His voice held no pride in the words, only a weariness that spoke of the burden such titles carried. "And you've been searching for me," Arya said, pieces falling into place. "Not just any healer, but specifically a Silver Moon healer because of this prophecy." "Yes," Alaric confirmed, lowering himself to sit across from her. "The Silver Moon lineage was thought to be destroyed in the Great Purge 20 years ago, a coordinated attack on your people led by Darius after he turned against his own kind." "Why?" Arya asked. "Why would he target my family specifically?" Alaric's expression darkened. "Because of the prophecy. When the last silver blood returns, balance shall be restored." Darius feared what that balance might mean for his plans. "And what does it mean?" Arya pressed, needing to understand. "It means," Alaric said carefully, "that together, the strongest Alpha and the last Silver Moon healer have the power to heal the rift between humans and werewolves, to end the Blood and Silver War once and for all, to create a sanctuary that extends beyond this clearing, beyond these mountains, a place where all can live in peace." The magnitude of what he was suggesting took Arya's breath away. That can't be true. I'm just a healer, a woman who spent 5 years hiding in the mountains because the world found her too different to accept." "You are far more than that," Alaric said, his voice gentle but firm. "You are the last of a powerful lineage, the one foretold to bring balance, and you've already begun, whether you realize it or not." He gestured to the wolves lying at her feet, to the small flowers that had sprouted through the floorboards of her cabin, life responding to her power in ways that defied explanation. "I've lived too long and seen too much suffering," Alaric continued, a vulnerability entering his voice that hadn't been there before. "I came searching for you, not just because of the prophecy, but because I was tired. Tired of war, tired of loss, tired of watching my people fade into shadow and legend. I thought perhaps finding the last Silver Moon would give me a purpose again, a reason to continue." He met her eyes, his golden gaze intense. "I didn't expect to find hope." Arya felt something shift within her at his words, a recognition of the burden this man had carried alone for longer than she could imagine. The King of Wolves, searching for a healer not just to fulfill a prophecy, but to heal his own wounded spirit. "I don't know if I can be what you need me to be," she said honestly. "I don't even know who I truly am yet." "Then we will discover it together," Alaric replied, "if you're willing." Outside, the sun climbed higher in the sky, casting long shadows through the cabin windows. The wolves at Arya's feet slept peacefully, the first denizens of her newly created sanctuary, and in the distance, beyond hearing but not beyond knowing, Arya sensed Lord Darius and his black guard regrouping, planning, preparing for their return. The battle had been postponed, not avoided. She looked at Alaric, this wounded king who had stumbled into her life bringing danger and destiny in equal measure. 5 years she had hidden from the world, from herself, from the power that had always been within her. Perhaps it was time to stop hiding. "Yes," she said finally, her voice soft but resolute. "I'm willing." The first sanctuary had been created. The last Silver Moon healer had begun to awaken to her power, and the King of Wolves had found not just the subject of an ancient prophecy, but a kindred spirit who understood the weight of difference and the courage it took to bear it. The path ahead would be dangerous, filled with enemies and challenges neither of them could yet foresee. But for the first time in years, Arya felt something she had thought lost forever: purpose. And with it, the faint stirring of hope. The silence that had been her companion for 5 years was broken now, replaced by the soft breathing of wolves, the quiet presence of a king, and the whispered promise of a future where she would no longer stand alone. Night fell over the mountain cabin like a protective cloak, stars emerging one by one in the velvet darkness. Arya moved quietly through the small space, lighting oil lamps that cast warm pools of light against the encroaching shadows. The wild wolves that had answered her unconscious call still lingered, two curled by the hearth, while the third kept vigilant watch at the window, amber eyes scanning the darkness beyond. Alaric sat at her rough-hewn table, his powerful frame making the simple wooden chair seem fragile beneath him. Though his wounds were healing at an astonishing rate, exhaustion had etched deep lines around his golden eyes. He watched Arya as she worked, his gaze thoughtful and assessing. "You have questions," he said finally, his deep voice breaking the companionable silence that had settled between them. Arya paused in her task of grinding dried herbs with mortar and pestle, preparing medicines they might need in the days to come. "More than I can count," she admitted, her hands resuming their rhythmic work. "I've lived my whole life believing I was alone, that my difference was a curse, not a lineage." "Your mother never told you of your heritage?" Alaric asked, genuine surprise in his voice. Arya shook her head, white hair falling across her pale features. "She taught me healing, herbcraft, the old stories of the moon goddess and her children. But she never said we were part of it." She set aside her work and joined him at the table, pink-tinged eyes meeting his golden gaze directly. "Perhaps she meant to, when I was older, but the fire came first." "The fire," Alaric repeated, understanding darkening his expression. "Part of the Great Purge. Darius and his followers sought to eliminate all of the Silver Moon lineage, fearing the prophecy." His large hand clenched into a fist on the table. "I should have stopped him then, before it went so far." "Why didn't you?" Arya asked, no accusation in her voice, only curiosity. Alaric was silent for a long moment, his eyes distant with memory. "Because once, he was my brother, in all but blood, my second in command, my most trusted advisor. I couldn't believe he would betray everything we stood for." The admission carried the weight of centuries of regret. By the time I accepted the truth, much of the damage was done. "Tell me about him," Arya said, sensing the pain beneath Alaric's words. "Help me understand what we're facing." Outside, the wind picked up, branches scraping against the cabin walls like spectral fingers. The wolf by the window growled softly, sensing something beyond human perception. "Darius and I ruled the 5 territories together for more than a century," Alaric began, his voice taking on the cadence of a storyteller sharing ancient history. He was brilliant, fearless, charismatic. Wolves would follow him anywhere, fight any battle at his command. And for many years, he used that influence wisely. Alaric's gaze turned toward the fire, as if seeing the past in its dancing flames. "Then came the Blood and Silver War, humans hunting our kind with new weapons, new tactics. We lost many, including Darius's sister Alara, killed by human hunters while in her wolf form." "That's when he changed?" "Not immediately. First came grief, then anger. Both understandable. I shared them." Alaric's voice dropped lower. But Darius's anger festered, turned to hatred. He began to advocate for a war of extermination against humans. When the Council of Alphas rejected his proposals, he disappeared for months. Thunder rumbled in the distance, as if the very elements responded to the dark tale. Arya felt the hair on her arms rise, not from fear, but from a strange resonance within her, as if her body recognized the significance of what she was hearing. "When he returned," Alaric continued, "he was changed. He had learned forbidden magics, old dark rituals that allowed him to sever his connection to his wolf while retaining some of its strength and longevity." His golden eyes met hers again, heavy with the burden of memory. "He betrayed us all, led human hunters to our sanctuaries, our hidden places, and then specifically targeted the Silver Moon lineage, your people, who had always been bridges between humans and werewolves." "Why?" Arya asked, though she suspected the answer. "Why focus on my lineage?" "Because of the prophecy," Alaric confirmed. "When the last silver blood returns, balance shall be restored." Darius saw it as a threat to his plans. In balance, there is no place for his vision of dominance and revenge. A soft blue light began to emanate from Arya's hands as her emotions intensified, illuminating her pale features from below. She looked down, startled by the manifestation of power she still barely understood. "It happens when you feel strongly," Alaric explained gently. Your power responds to your emotions: fear, anger, compassion. In time, you'll learn to control it rather than it controlling you. Arya stared at her glowing hands, wonder and trepidation mingling in her expression. What else can I do that I don't know about? She whispered. The Silver Moon lineage had many gifts, Alaric said. Healing was primary among them, but also the ability to create sanctuaries, places of protection and restoration where no violence could enter. Some could speak with animals, not just wolves, but all creatures. Others could sense emotions, intentions, and the strongest could even heal the spirit, not just the body. And you believe I have these abilities? Skepticism colored Arya's voice, despite the evidence literally glowing before her eyes. I know you do, Alaric replied with quiet certainty. You've been using them all along, even without realizing it. How else have you survived alone in these mountains for 5 years? How do wounded creatures find their way to your door? Why do plants flourish under your care beyond all normal measure? Arya had no answer. These things she had attributed to luck, to careful study of her mother's teachings, to simple kindness repaid. But Alaric's words resonated with a truth she had always sensed but never acknowledged. If what you say is true, she said slowly, if I am this last silver blood from the prophecy, then what does that mean for me? For us? Alaric leaned forward, his presence filling the small cabin. It means you have a choice, Arya. You can continue hiding in these mountains, using your gifts in small ways, or you can embrace your heritage, your potential, and help restore the balance that has been lost for generations. By doing what exactly? Practical as always, Arya wanted specifics, not grand pronouncements. By coming with me to the 5 territories, Alaric said. By standing before the Council of Alphas as what you are, living proof that the Silver Moon lineage survives. By using your gifts to heal the divisions between humans and werewolves, to create new sanctuaries where both can coexist. It sounded impossible. Arya, who had spent years avoiding even the nearest human village, was being asked to step into a role that would place her at the center of an ancient conflict, to use powers she barely understood to heal rifts generations in the making. And what of Darius and his Black Guard? She asked. They'll try to stop us. Yes, Alaric acknowledged, his expression grave. They'll hunt us every step of the way, but they fear what we represent together, the prophecy fulfilled. That fear will make them reckless. A sudden howl pierced the night, not from the wolves within the cabin, but from the forest beyond. A warning. The wolf at the window stiffened, hackles rising. They're coming back, Arya said, rising from her seat. The blue glow from her hands intensified, casting eerie shadows across the cabin walls. Alaric stood as well, his movements fluid despite his recent injuries. Sooner than I expected, he said grimly. Darius must be desperate indeed. What do we do? Arya moved to the window, peering into the darkness where distant torches flickered between the trees like malevolent fireflies. We stand our ground, Alaric replied, his voice taking on the unmistakable tone of command that had led armies of wolves across centuries. Your sanctuary protected us before. It will do so again. But doubt flickered across Arya's face. I don't know how I did it the first time. It just happened. Alaric crossed to her side, his large hand engulfing her smaller one, steadying the tremor she hadn't realized was there. You did it because it was necessary, he said softly. Because something in you refused to allow harm to come to a wounded creature in your care. That same instinct will serve you now. His touch sent warmth cascading through Arya's body, the blue glow of her hands intensifying where his skin met hers. There was a connection between them, undeniable and growing stronger, something beyond the prophecy, beyond their shared purpose. I barely know you, she whispered, the realization both troubling and exhilarating. Yet I feel as if we've known each other across lifetimes, Alaric finished, his golden eyes reflecting the blue light of her power. Perhaps we have. The moon goddess works in patterns beyond our understanding. The wolves by the hearth rose as one, sensing the approaching threat. The one at the window bared its teeth in a silent snarl. Arya reluctantly pulled her hand from Alaric's, focusing on the immediate danger. They'll expect us to be here, she said, mind working quickly. This cabin is too small, too vulnerable. We need somewhere with more space, more advantage." "You know these mountains," Alaric said. "Where?" Arya considered for a moment. "There's a clearing about a mile north, surrounded by old stone formations. Locals say they're ancient wolf shrines, though I never believed it until now. If we can reach it—" "Then lead the way," Alaric said without hesitation. "I trust your knowledge of this land." The simple statement, "I trust you," carried more weight than flowery declarations ever could. Arya nodded once, decision made. She gathered her medicine bag, a few essential supplies, and wrapped her worn cloak around her shoulders. "We'll need to move quickly," she said, her earlier fear replaced by resolute determination. "The path isn't easy, especially in darkness." "Darkness is our ally tonight," Alaric replied, donning the shirt and breeches she had provided from her small store of clothing, items left by a woodsman who had traded for her remedies years ago. They were snug on his powerful frame, but serviceable. Wolves see better at night than humans do. Even Darius has lost some of that advantage by turning from his true nature. They slipped out the back door of the cabin into the chill mountain night, the 3 wild wolves flanking them like an honor guard. More shapes moved in the forest around them, deer stepping delicately between trees, foxes padding silently alongside, owls swooping overhead, all following the silent call of Arya's awakening power. "They're coming to you," Alaric observed quietly as they moved through the forest, "creating a living sanctuary around us." "I'm not doing it consciously," Arya said, wonder in her voice as a majestic elk fell into step beside them, its massive antlers gleaming in the moonlight. "That's the nature of a true power," Alaric replied. "It knows what is needed before the mind can direct it. Your instincts are far wiser than your doubts." They moved through the forest like shadows, Arya leading the way along hidden trails known only to those who had learned the mountain's secrets. Behind them, the torches of the Black Guard spread out, hunting patterns that revealed their military precision. Darius had trained them well. When they reached the clearing Arya had described, Alaric stopped at its edge, a look of wonder crossing his weathered features. "You brought us to the ancient circle," he said, voice hushed with reverence. The clearing was perfectly round, ringed by standing stones carved with symbols that gleamed faintly in the moonlight, spirals, crescent moons, paw prints. At the center stood a larger stone altar, its surface worn smooth by time and elements. "You know this place?" Arya asked, surprised. "Every Wolf King is taught its location, though many believed it lost to time." Alaric stepped into the clearing, his bearing even more regal within the ancient site. "This is where the first pact between the 5 territories was made, centuries ago, where the first Silver Moon healer blessed the alliance of the pack leaders." Understanding dawned in Arya's eyes. That's why the locals speak of it as a wolf shrine. The knowledge survived even if the meaning was lost. "And you led us here instinctively," Alaric said, giving her a look of newfound respect. "Your blood remembers what your mind does not." Arya moved to the center of the clearing, drawn to the stone altar by an inexplicable pull. When her fingers touched its smooth surface, blue light flared from the contact point, racing along invisible channels in the stone, illuminating ancient carvings that had been hidden by centuries of wear. The standing stones around the perimeter began to glow in response, creating a perfect circle of blue-white light. "The sanctuary awakens," Alaric breathed, watching as the light spread across the ground, forming intricate patterns like frost crystals growing across glass, just as it was foretold. Arya felt power surging through her body, different from before, not just her own abilities magnified, but something older, deeper, connecting her to generations of her lineage who had stood in this very spot. Voices seemed to whisper in the wind, guiding her actions though she could not distinguish their words. "They're coming," Alaric warned, his keen hearing detecting what Arya could not yet hear, the approach of the Black Guard, drawn by the supernatural light now visible for miles in the darkness. "Let them come," Arya said, her voice resonant with new confidence. "This ground is sacred to both wolf and healer. Here, we have the advantage." The first of the Black Guard burst into the clearing moments later, weapons raised, only to falter at the sight before them. The ancient circle awakened, blue light flowing like water across the ground, and at its center, Arya and Alaric standing before the altar stone, flanked by wild creatures of the forest. Lord Darius emerged from the trees last, his aristocratic features contorted with rage and something else, fear perhaps, or recognition of what he faced. "The ancient circle," he snarled, stopping at the perimeter where the blue light formed a clear boundary. "Of course she would lead you here, brother. How predictable you've become in your sentimentality." "Not sentimentality," Alaric replied calmly. "Strategy. You cannot cross that threshold without permission, Darius, not since you turned from your true nature." Darius's men looked to him uncertainly, sensing the power emanating from the circle, but not understanding its significance. "Superstitious nonsense," Darius scoffed, though he made no move to step across the glowing boundary. "Ancient magic has no place in the modern world. Progress requires that we leave such limitations behind." "Is that what you call it?" Alaric asked, genuine sadness in his voice. "Progress? Betraying your kind, hunting them to extinction, destroying the very balance that has sustained our world for millennia?" "Balance kept us hiding in shadows." Darius's composure cracked, revealing the festering wound beneath his sophisticated veneer. "Balance kept us bowing to humans who killed Alara like an animal, who would exterminate us all if given the chance." "Your sister's death was a tragedy," Arya spoke up, her voice clear in the night air. "But you dishonor her memory by becoming what she feared most." Darius's cold eyes snapped to her, narrowing dangerously. "What would you know of my sister, Silver Moon Witch?" "I know loss," Arya replied simply. "I know what it is to have your family taken from you, to be the only survivor, to carry that pain like a stone in your heart day after day, year after year." Her words struck a chord. Darius's expression flickered, a momentary glimpse of the grief he had buried beneath layers of hatred and revenge. For a heartbeat, Arya saw the wolf he had once been, honorable, loyal, broken by loss. Then the moment passed, his features hardening once more. "Pretty words won't save you. Or him." He turned to his men. "The circle prevents us from entering, but not our weapons. Notch your arrows. Silver tips. Aim for the witch first, then the so-called king." The Black Guard raised their bows, arrows glinting with lethal silver points. Arya felt fear spike through her, but alongside it, a surge of protective rage. These stones had stood for centuries, bearing witness to covenants of peace. She would not allow them to be desecrated by bloodshed. Without conscious thought, she raised her hands. Blue light exploded outward from her palms, forming a dome of shimmering energy over the entire circle. When the first arrow struck it, they sizzled into ash, harmless as falling leaves. "You cannot touch us here!" Arya called out, her voice stronger than she had ever heard it. "This sanctuary rejects your violence. Leave now while you still can." Darius's face contorted with fury. "Fire the rest," he commanded his men. "Keep firing until the witch's power fails." Arrows rained against the dome of light, each dissolving on contact. With every assault, Arya felt her connection to the ancient site growing stronger, as if the circle itself was feeding her power, sustaining her in ways she had never experienced. Beside her, Alaric watched with undisguised admiration. "Your strength is remarkable," he murmured. "Even among your lineage, few could maintain such a shield." "It's not just me," Arya replied, understanding flowing through her like the blue light that encircled them. "It's this place, the generations that came before, the oath sworn here." She turned to him, revelation in her eyes. The first alliance between the 5 territories and the Silver Moon lineage. It was a blood oath, wasn't it? Binding on both sides. Alaric nodded slowly. The first Wolf King swore protection to the Silver Moon healers in exchange for their sanctuaries and healing. That oath has never been broken, not even by Darius's betrayal. The magic still holds. "Then we can use it," Arya said, an idea forming. "We can remind him of what he once was, of the oath that still binds him, wolf or not." Before Alaric could respond, a new sound reached them, howling, distant at first, but growing closer. Not the wild wolves that had accompanied them, but something else, something organized, purposeful. Darius heard it too, his head snapping up in recognition. Fear flashed across his aristocratic features. "No," he breathed. "Impossible." From the forest emerged wolves, dozens of them, massive beasts with gleaming eyes and powerful builds. Unlike the wild wolves, these moved with military precision, forming a perimeter around the Black Guard. At their head walked a wolf larger than the rest, with fur as black as midnight and eyes like burning coals. Alaric straightened, recognition and relief washing over his features. "The Royal Guard," he said to Arya. "My elite warriors, they've been tracking me since I was wounded." The Black Guard shifted nervously, suddenly outnumbered and surrounded. Their bows, so effective against 2 targets, now seemed woefully inadequate against the sea of fangs and claws that encircled them. The Midnight Wolf approached the glowing perimeter of the ancient circle, then shifted form in a fluid motion that left a man kneeling where the wolf had been, older, battle-scarred, with gray streaking his dark hair and absolute loyalty in his eyes. "My king," he said to Alaric, head bowed in respect. "We have been searching since you disappeared. When we found signs of hunters and blood on your trail, we feared the worst." "Rise, Commander Varro," Alaric replied warmly. "As you can see, my wounds have been well tended thanks to Arya." He gestured to her with unmistakable respect, the last of the Silver Moon lineage and keeper of this sanctuary. The commander's eyes widened as he took in Arya's distinctive appearance and the blue light that flowed from her hands. He rose and bowed deeply to her, genuine reverence in the gesture. "My Lady of the Silver Moon, we had thought your line lost to us. This is a day of miracles." Darius watched this exchange with growing alarm, his careful plans unraveling before his eyes. "This changes nothing," he declared, though his voice lacked its earlier confidence. "Your wolves cannot cross the circle either, brother. We remain at impasse." "Not quite," Alaric replied, a dangerous edge entering his voice. "My royal guard outnumbers your black guard 10-1. They cannot enter the sanctuary without permission, true, but you cannot leave it without facing them." Understanding dawned on Darius's face. He was trapped between the sanctuary he could not enter and the wolves he could not defeat. Arya stepped forward, moving to the very edge of the glowing perimeter. "There is another option," she said, her voice carrying to all present. "Reconciliation, remembrance of oaths sworn, and bonds forged." "Never!" Darius spat, though uncertainty flickered in his eyes. "Your hatred has consumed you, brother," Alaric said sadly. "But it has not erased what you once were. The oath you swore as my second-in-command still binds you, even if you refuse to acknowledge it." "That oath was to a cause you abandoned," Darius retorted, "to the protection of our kind above all else." "No," Alaric countered firmly. "The oath was to balance, to justice, to the ancient covenant between wolf and healer that has sustained our world since the first moon rose over these mountains." As they spoke, Arya felt the power of the ancient circle responding, the blue light pulsing with each word as if the very ground was listening, judging the truth of what was said. And with sudden clarity, she understood what needed to be done. "Alaric," she said quietly, turning to him, "I need your blood, freely given." He met her gaze, comprehension dawning in his golden eyes. Without hesitation, he drew a claw across his palm, allowing crimson drops to fall onto the stone altar. Arya did the same, her pale skin parting easily under her small blade, blood mingling with his on the ancient stone. The moment their blood combined, the blue light intensified, shooting upward in a column that illuminated the entire clearing like daylight. Within that light, images formed, ghostly shapes of wolves and healers from centuries past, standing together in the very circle where they now stood. Voices echoed from the standing stones, speaking words in an ancient language few remembered, but all present somehow understood. Blood to blood, oath to oath, the balance must be restored. Darius stared at the apparitions, recognition and shock breaking through his carefully constructed mask of hatred. "Elara," he whispered, as one of the ghostly figures turned toward him, a young woman with his same aristocratic features but gentler eyes. The apparition spoke directly to him, her voice like wind through autumn leaves. "Brother, your grief has blinded you to the truth. I died not because of what we are, but because the balance was already broken. Healing comes not from revenge, but from remembrance of who we truly are." Tears formed in Darius's eyes. The first, Arya suspected, that he had allowed himself since his sister's death. "I tried to avenge you," he said, his voice breaking with emotion long suppressed. "And in doing so, became what killed me," the apparition replied sadly. "Return to your true path, brother. Remember your oath." The vision faded, the blue light receding until only the glowing perimeter remained. Darius stood frozen, the careful construction of hatred and revenge he had built over decades cracking like ice in spring thaw. Arya stepped forward, extending her hand across the threshold of light. "The sanctuary will accept you," she said gently, "if you come in peace, if you remember the wolf you once were." For a long moment, Darius remained motionless, conflict evident in every line of his body. Then slowly he removed the silver blade from his belt and placed it on the ground. "I remember," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Gods help me, I remember everything I tried so hard to forget." He stepped forward, hand outstretched toward Arya's. When his fingers crossed the glowing boundary, blue light surged up his arm, enveloping him. He gasped, falling to his knees as decades of hatred and the dark magic he had used to sever his wolf were purged from his body in a cascade of shadow and light. When the transformation finished, Darius looked up at them with eyes that had changed, no longer cold and empty, but amber gold like his sister's had been. The wolf he had suppressed for so long had returned. "What have you done to me?" he asked, wonder and fear mingling in his voice. "Not us," Alaric replied, helping his former brother to his feet. "The sanctuary, the ancient magic of this place, it restored what you willingly gave up." Darius stared at his hands, feeling the wolf stirring within him after years of absence. "I don't deserve this mercy," he said quietly, "after what I've done. The Silver Moon families I helped destroy. Your own Luna I betrayed to hunters." "Perhaps not," Alaric acknowledged, no false comfort in his words. "But redemption begins with recognition of one's crimes, with the choice to walk a different path." Arya watched this exchange with mixed emotions. The man before them had orchestrated the deaths of her people, had been responsible for the fire that claimed her family. Yet she could sense the genuine transformation occurring within him, the restoration not just of his wolf, but of the honor he had once possessed. "The past cannot be undone," she said finally, "but the future remains unwritten. The oath between wolf and healer calls for balance, not vengeance, justice, not retribution." Around the clearing, the Black Guard watched in stunned silence as their leader underwent this profound change. Some threw down their weapons, following Darius's example. Others backed away, unwilling to abandon the path of hatred they had chosen. Commander Varro and the Royal Guard maintained their positions, awaiting Alaric's command. The wild creatures that had gathered to Arya's call watched with ancient, unknowable wisdom in their eyes. "What happens now?" Darius asked, looking between Arya and Alaric. "Now," Alaric said, his voice carrying the weight of his position as king, "we return to the 5 territories. We present Arya to the Council of Alphas as the last of the Silver Moon lineage. We begin the work of restoring balance, as the prophecy foretold." "And you?" Arya asked Darius directly, needing to hear his choice spoken aloud. Darius met her gaze, the newly restored wolf in his eyes making evasion impossible. "I have much to atone for," he said gravely. "If you will allow it, I would begin that atonement by helping to protect what I once sought to destroy." It was not forgiveness. That would take far more than a moment of magical transformation. But it was a beginning, a step toward healing wounds generations in the making. Arya nodded once, accepting his pledge. Then she turned to Alaric, awareness of what they had just accomplished washing over her. "We've fulfilled the first part of the prophecy," she said softly. "When the last silver blood returns, balance shall be restored, at least for tonight, in this ancient place." "The beginning only," Alaric cautioned, though pride shone in his golden eyes. "The path ahead remains long and difficult. The 5 territories have known division and fear for too long. Many will resist change, even positive change." "Then we face it together," Arya said with newfound confidence. "The healer and the king, as it was always meant to be." The blue light of the sanctuary pulsed once more, as if in confirmation of her words. The ancient covenant had been remembered, the blood oath renewed. What had been broken was taking the first steps toward wholeness. Dawn was approaching, the first pale light of morning touching the eastern sky. Arya felt weariness settling into her bones, maintaining the sanctuary's power, witnessing Darius's transformation, renewing the ancient covenant with her blood. All had taken a toll greater than she had realized. Alaric noticed immediately, his keen eyes missing nothing. "You need rest," he said, his voice gentle with concern. "We've accomplished enough for one night." He turned to Commander Varro, his bearing once more that of a king issuing commands. "Secure the area. Those of the Black Guard who have laid down their weapons are to be treated with caution, but not hostility. Those who flee are to be tracked but not harmed. We need to know where they go, who they contact." "And Lord Darius?" Varro asked, understandable wariness in his tone. Alaric exchanged a look with his former second-in-command, centuries of history passing between them in that glance. "He remains under my personal supervision," he decided. "The sanctuary has restored his wolf, but trust must be earned through actions, not magic." Darius nodded, accepting this judgment without protest, another sign of the profound change wrought by the ancient circle's power. As the royal guard moved to carry out Alaric's orders, he turned back to Arya, concern evident in his expression. "The journey to the 5 territories is long and not without danger. You need time to recover your strength before we attempt it." Arya nodded, practical as always despite the extraordinary events of the night. "My cabin isn't far. We can rest there today, prepare for the journey tomorrow." They left the ancient circle as dawn fully broke over the mountains, the blue light fading with the coming of day, but not disappearing entirely. A faint luminescence remained, marking the renewal of power in this sacred place. The wild creatures that had gathered dispersed back into the forest, though Arya sensed they remained nearby, still connected to her awakening power. By the time they reached her cabin, Arya was struggling to remain upright, the toll of channeling such powerful magic finally catching up with her. Without hesitation or embarrassment, Alaric swept her into his arms, carrying her the final distance with effortless strength. "I can walk," she protested weakly, though she made no real attempt to leave the security of his hold. "You've done enough for one night," Alaric replied, his voice brooking no argument. "Allow yourself this moment of weakness. It doesn't diminish your strength." He carried her inside and gently laid her on her bed, his powerful hands surprisingly tender. Their eyes met, something unspoken passing between them, a recognition of the bond forming that went beyond prophecy or ancient oaths. "Rest," he said softly, reluctantly withdrawing his touch. "I'll keep watch." Arya wanted to respond, to acknowledge the growing connection between them, but exhaustion claimed her before she could form the words. She drifted into sleep, her dreams filled with blue light, ancient stones, and the steady presence of a wolf king who had waited centuries to find her. When she woke, the sun was already westering, golden light slanting through her cabin windows. She found Alaric seated in her chair by the fire, deep in conversation with Commander Varro, and, surprisingly, Darius. They spoke in low tones, their discussion intense but not hostile. "The northern packs will resist," Darius was saying as she stirred. "They've grown isolated, distrustful of any authority beyond their own territories." "All the more reason they need to witness what we've discovered," Alaric countered. "The return of a silver moon healer changes everything." Arya sat up, drawing their attention. All 3 men rose at her appearance, a gesture of respect that would have embarrassed her just days ago, but now felt strangely appropriate. "How do you feel?" Alaric asked, genuine concern in his golden eyes. "Stronger," Arya replied honestly, taking inventory of her body and spirit. The bone-deep weariness had receded, replaced by a new awareness of the power flowing through her veins, steadier now, more controlled. "Different," she added after a moment's reflection, "as if something that was sleeping inside me has finally awakened." "The ancient circle's effect," Darius said, his manner deferential in a way that still startled her. "When you renewed the blood oath, it fully activated your lineage's power." Arya studied him, seeing the visible changes wrought by his restoration. His eyes now held the wolf's amber gold, his movements more fluid, less rigidly controlled. But more significant was the absence of the cold hatred that had defined him before, replaced by a wary humility that spoke of painful self-knowledge. "You understand the old magics," she observed, "more than either of us." Darius inclined his head, acknowledging the truth of her statement. "I studied the ancient ways extensively, first to honor them, later to find ways to circumvent them." Shame flickered briefly across his features. Knowledge acquired for the wrong reasons, but perhaps now it can serve a better purpose. "We were discussing the journey to the 5 territories," Alaric explained, bringing her into the conversation as an equal. "The challenges we'll face in presenting you to the Council of Alphas." Arya rose from the bed, smoothing her simple clothes and moving to join them at the table. "Tell me everything I need to know," she said. "No more half-truths or partial explanations. If I'm to face this council, I need to understand exactly what I'm walking into." Approval flickered in Alaric's eyes at her directness. He nodded to Commander Vero, who spread a roughly drawn map on the table. "The 5 territories," Vero explained, his weathered finger tracing boundaries on the parchment. "Once united under a single banner, now fragmented and suspicious of one another. The northern packs, ruled by Alpha Torn, value strength above all else and have grown increasingly isolationist." His finger moved south. "The river clans, led by Alpha Selene, maintain the oldest traditions and remain closest to their wolf nature. They'll be most receptive to the prophecy's fulfillment." He continued the tour of the map, outlining the Mountain Confederacy with their warrior culture, the eastern forests with their emphasis on stealth and subtlety, and finally the Central Plains, Alaric's direct domain, from which he nominally ruled all 5 territories, though that rule had grown increasingly tenuous in recent decades. "And where do the sanctuaries fit into this geography?" Arya asked, studying the map with keen interest. "They don't anymore," Darius answered quietly. "The Great Purge destroyed most of them. Those that remain are hidden, forgotten, their power dormant without Silvermoon healers to maintain them." Arya absorbed this information, its implications settling heavy on her shoulders. "So I'm not just the last of my lineage," she said slowly. "I'm the only one who can restore these sanctuaries." "Yes," Alaric confirmed, no false comfort in his honesty. "The burden is great, the expectation greater. Some will hail you as the fulfillment of prophecy. Others will fear what your return means for the power structures they've built in the absence of balance. And some," Darius added grimly, "will seek to eliminate you before you can fully realize your potential, just as I once did." His candor was brutal, but necessary. "My former followers in the Black Guard who fled last night will spread word of your existence. We must assume they'll reach the territories before we do." Commander Vero's expression darkened, "which means assassins and ambushes may await us on the journey." "Then we travel with care," Arya said practically, "and we use what advantages we have." She looked to Alaric. "How soon can we leave?" "Tomorrow at dawn," he replied, approval evident in his tone. "The Royal Guard will provide escort. We'll take the mountain passes to avoid the main roads where ambush would be easier." Darius cleared his throat, hesitation evident in his manner. "There is another matter to consider," he said carefully, "the nature of your relationship." Arya felt heat rise to her cheeks, though she kept her expression neutral. "Explain." "The prophecy speaks of the strongest alpha and the last Silvermoon healer restoring balance together," Darius elaborated. "In pack terms, that implies a specific bond, Luna and Alpha, mates in the eyes of wolf law. The Council of Alphas will expect such a declaration, particularly given the history of the First Covenant." Arya glanced at Alaric, finding his golden eyes already on her, unreadable but intense. They had known each other mere days, had been thrown together by circumstance and ancient prophecy. Yet the connection between them was undeniable, growing stronger with each passing hour. "We've hardly had time to discuss such matters," she said, diplomatic but firm. "And we won't be rushed into declarations to satisfy tradition," Alaric added, his support immediate and resolute. "The prophecy speaks of partnership, of complementary powers working in harmony. The precise nature of that partnership is for us alone to determine." Commander Vero nodded, respecting his king's decision, though concern lingered in his expression. "The traditionalists won't be satisfied with such an explanation," he cautioned. "They'll see it as weakness, as hesitation." "Let them," Alaric replied, a dangerous edge entering his voice. "I've ruled the 5 territories for centuries. I didn't survive this long by bowing to others' expectations." Darius studied them both, something like wistful understanding in his restored eyes. "The bond is forming regardless," he observed quietly. "Anyone with wolf senses can detect it. Your scents are already mingling, your energies responding to each other. The formal declaration may wait, but the reality exists nonetheless." Arya felt another flush of warmth at his words, knowing their truth even as she resisted the implications. She had lived alone for 5 years, had built walls around her heart as solid as those around her cabin. To have them breached so quickly, so thoroughly, by a man who was more legend than reality mere days ago, it defied all her careful plans for a quiet, solitary existence. Yet she couldn't deny the pull she felt toward Alaric, the sense of rightness when they stood together, the way her power responded to his presence. Was that prophecy and ancient magic at work, or something more personal, more profound? "We should prepare for tomorrow's journey," she said, redirecting the conversation to practical matters. "I need to gather herbs, medicines. We don't know what we'll face on the road." The men accepted her change of subject with grace, returning to discussion of routes and security measures. But Arya caught Alaric watching her throughout the evening, his golden eyes thoughtful, patient, but burning with an intensity that both thrilled and terrified her. As night fell once more, the cabin grew crowded with planning and preparation. Commander Vero eventually withdrew to check the perimeter with his royal guard, while Darius, still under close supervision, was permitted to shift to his newly restored wolf form and run the boundaries of Arya's small sanctuary, a test of both his control and his trustworthiness. Left alone with Alaric for the first time since the events at the Ancient Circle, Arya found herself uncharacteristically nervous, hyper-aware of his powerful presence in her small home. "You should sleep," she said, busying herself with packing herbs into travel pouches. "Tomorrow will be demanding." "As should you," he countered gently. "Yet here we both are, avoiding rest and perhaps avoiding other matters as well." His directness brought her movements to a halt. She turned to face him fully, determined to meet his honesty with her own. "I don't know what this is between us," she admitted. "Prophecy, magic, circumstance, or something else entirely." "Does it matter what we call it?" Alaric asked, closing the distance between them with slow, deliberate steps. "The feeling itself remains the same." "It matters to me," Arya insisted. "I've spent my life being defined by others, as an aberration, a witch, a creature to be feared or pitied. Now I'm suddenly a prophesied savior, the last of an ancient lineage, a potential Luna to a wolf king I've known for all of 3 days." Understanding softened Alaric's expression. "You fear losing yourself in these new identities," he said, his perception cutting straight to the heart of her concern. "You fear that what grows between us is not choice, but compulsion." "Yes," she admitted, relieved that he understood without judgment. Alaric stopped an arm's length away, respecting her space while maintaining the connection between them. "I have lived centuries, Arya," he said, his voice deepening with the weight of accumulated wisdom. "I have seen prophecies fulfilled and broken, have watched fate and free will dance their eternal dance across generations, and I have learned one truth that surpasses all others. Destiny may open doors, but we choose whether to walk through them and how." He reached out slowly, giving her every opportunity to withdraw, and when she didn't, he gently took her hand in his. Blue light sparked where their skin met, a visible manifestation of the connection they both felt. "I do not want you as my Luna because prophecy demands it," he continued, his golden eyes holding hers with unwavering intensity. "I want you because in 3 days you have shown more courage, compassion, and integrity than most display in a lifetime. Because your strength complements mine in ways I never knew I needed. Because when you speak, I find myself listening not as a king humoring a subject, but as a man hearing wisdom he recognizes as truth." The simple honesty of his words struck deeper than flowery declarations ever could have. Arya felt tears gathering in her eyes, not from sadness, but from the relief of being seen, truly seen, perhaps for the first time in her life. "I'm afraid," she admitted, the confession barely audible. "Not of you, but of all this means. Of failing. Of not being enough to fulfill what everyone will expect of me." "Then we are well matched," Alaric replied with unexpected gentleness. "For I have carried the same fear for centuries, that I am not worthy of the crown I wear, the loyalty I receive, the trust placed in me by generations of wolves." He brought her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her palm where blue light still glowed faintly. "Perhaps that is the true meaning of the prophecy. Not that we are perfect beings destined for greatness, but that in our imperfection, our shared fears and hopes, we find the strength to create something better than either could achieve alone." Arya felt something shift within her at his words, not the dramatic transformation of magical awakening, but the quieter, deeper change of barriers, carefully constructed over years, beginning to lower. Trust, that most precious and fragile of gifts, taking root in soil long barren. "I don't know if I can be what they need me to be," she said softly. "This Luna, this healer of ancient power. I'm still just Arya, the albino woman who lived alone in the mountains because the world had no place for her." "Then be Arya," Alaric replied simply. "Be the woman who saved a wounded wolf without thought for her own safety, who faced down the black guard with nothing but courage and instinct, who awakened an ancient sanctuary through sheer force of will and compassion. His eyes held hers, unwavering in their certainty. That woman is more than enough. She always has been. The truth of his words resonated deep within her, touching a place that had been wounded since childhood, the belief that she was somehow less, somehow wrong, because of her difference. In Alaric's golden eyes, she saw not pity or fear or even fascination with her uniqueness, but genuine respect and growing affection for exactly who she was. "We should rest," she said finally, not pulling her hand from his, but acknowledging the practical reality of the journey ahead. "Dawn comes early in these mountains." Alaric nodded, reluctantly releasing her hand. "Tomorrow we begin the true test," he said. "The ancient circle was but the first step. The 5 territories will present challenges we cannot yet foresee." "Then we'll face them as they come," Arya replied, newfound resolve in her voice. "Together." The word hung between them, simple but profound in its implications. Not king and subject, not alpha and omega, not even the formal titles of prophecy, but simply together, equals despite their differences, complementary strengths aligned toward a common purpose. As she prepared for sleep, Arya felt a strange peace settling over her, despite the uncertainty of the path ahead. For 5 years, she had survived alone, finding solace in silence and solitude. Now she stood at the threshold of a new life, one that would take her far from her mountain sanctuary into a world of pack politics, ancient magics, and potential dangers. Yet for the first time since fire had claimed her childhood home, she did not feel alone. The last Silver Moon healer had found her guardian, her champion, her equal. Whether prophecy or choice had brought them together no longer seemed to matter. What mattered was the journey ahead, and the promise of dawn bringing new possibilities. For her, for Alaric, for the balance their union might restore to a world long fractured by hatred and fear. Outside her cabin, wolves howled in the darkness, the royal guard maintaining their vigilant perimeter, the wild wolves responding from the forest depths, their voices blending in harmony as they had not done for generations. And in that ancient song, Arya heard the echo of her own awakening power, the whisper of possibilities yet to unfold, and the promise of a future where difference was not weakness, but strength, where wounds, centuries old, might finally begin to heal. Dawn broke over the mountain peaks in ribbons of gold and crimson, painting the world anew as Arya stood at the threshold of her cabin for what she knew might be the last time. 5 years this small shelter had been her refuge, her sanctuary against a world that had no place for someone like her. Now she was leaving it behind, stepping into a destiny she still only partially understood. "Are you ready?" Alaric's deep voice came from behind her, gentle despite its natural authority. Arya drew in a breath of crisp mountain air, committing to memory the scent of pine, the distant call of eagles, the particular quality of light that belonged only to these high places. "As ready as I can be," she answered truthfully. She turned to face him, struck once again by the regal power of his presence. Overnight, the royal guard had provided proper clothing for their king, fine leather and wool in deep forest green and silver, fitted to his powerful frame. With his silver-white hair pulled back and secured with a clasp bearing the insignia of the 5 territories, he looked every inch the Alpha King of legend. Beside him stood Commander Vero, vigilant and respectful, and somewhat to Arya's surprise, Darius, his transformation from the previous night holding steady in the clear light of morning. His eyes still held the wolf's amber gold. His bearing changed from cold aristocrat to something more primal, more authentic. Beyond them, through the open door, Arya could see the royal guard assembled, 50 elite warriors in human form, with another 50 in wolf form, creating a protective perimeter around her small clearing. Their discipline was evident even to her untrained eye, their loyalty to Alaric absolute. "The northern pass is clear," Vero reported. "Our scouts report no sign of the Black Guard who fled, but that doesn't mean they aren't watching." Alaric nodded, his golden eyes scanning the assembled forces with a general's practiced assessment. "We move in formation as planned. Arya in the center, surrounded by our strongest fighters. Darius and I will lead. Vero commands the rear guard." The practical matter of her position in this procession helped ground Arya in the reality of what they were undertaking. This wasn't myth or prophecy now, but a dangerous journey through potentially hostile territory. She secured her medicine bag across her body, herbs and poultices carefully packed for whatever wounds they might encounter. "What should I expect when we reach the 5 territories?" she asked, needing concrete details rather than abstract pronouncements. "Suspicion," Darius answered before Alaric could speak. "Awe, fear, hope. You represent change, Aria of the Silver Moon. Those who benefit from the current order will resist you. Those who suffer under it will rally to you. And those in between?" Aria pressed, appreciating his blunt honesty. "They will wait and watch," Alaric said, his eyes meeting hers with respect for her practical questioning. "The Council of Alphas will demand proof of your lineage, demonstrations of your power. Some will test you, others will try to manipulate you for their own purposes." Aria absorbed this without flinching. Politics, then, not so different from the village hierarchies she'd observed from the margins all her life, just with sharper teeth. "The river clans will support you immediately," Darius continued. "Alpha Selene has kept the old ways and will recognize the significance of your return. The northern packs under Alpha Torn will be most resistant. They value physical strength above all else and will see your healing gifts as weakness." "Then they understand nothing of true strength," Aria replied simply, earning approving looks from both Alaric and Varro. She stepped outside, feeling the weight of dozens of eyes upon her. The royal guard straightened as she appeared, many lowering their eyes in respect. One of the wolves in the perimeter, a lean female with unusual silver markings, broke formation just enough to approach Aria, lowering her head in what appeared to be a gesture of deference before returning to her position. "Lyra recognizes what you are," Alaric explained, coming to stand beside her. "She's one of our oldest wolves, a keeper of stories. She remembers when Silver Moon healers still walked among the packs." Aria felt a connection with the silver-marked wolf, a recognition that transcended words. She inclined her head in acknowledgement, receiving a soft whine in response. "It is time," Varro announced, signaling to his warriors who formed into a precise traveling formation. Aria cast one final glance at her cabin, the herbs hanging from the rafters, the small workbench where she had prepared remedies, the hearth where she had sat through countless solitary evenings. A chapter of her life was ending. What would replace it remained to be written. With a deep breath, she stepped into the formation of warriors, Alaric moving to her side. His hand brushed hers briefly, a touch of reassurance that sent now familiar blue sparks dancing between them. "Together," he said quietly, echoing their understanding from the night before. "Together," she affirmed. And with that simple exchange, they began the journey that would take her from isolation to the heart of a conflict generations in the making. They traveled swiftly through the high mountain passes, the royal guard moving with the precision of a unit long accustomed to protecting their king through hostile territory. Half remained in wolf form at all times, their senses sharper, while the others maintained human form, weapons at the ready. By midday, they had descended from Aria's secluded heights into denser forest, the air growing warmer, the vegetation more lush. Aria noted the changing flora with a healer's eye, mentally cataloging plants she might need for remedies. "The 5 territories begin just beyond that ridge," Alaric told her as they paused briefly to rest. "Once we cross it, word of our coming will spread quickly through pack networks." "How long until we reach the Council of Alphas?" Aria asked, accepting a water skin from one of the guards with a grateful nod. 3 days to the Central Plains, Varro answered, "if we travel without incident." The "if" hung heavy in the air. Despite the impressive strength of their escort, danger lurked in the uncertainty of what awaited them. The Black Guard members who had fled might have already spread word of Aria's existence, of Darius's transformation. Preparations would be underway, alliances forming, plots hatching. They resumed their journey as the sun began its westward arc. Aria found herself watching Darius, who moved with the fluid grace of a predator at the front of their formation. His transformation from the previous night had held steady, his wolf nature fully restored. Yet the knowledge of his crimes remained, a shadow behind his amber eyes whenever they met hers. "You don't trust him," Alaric observed quietly as they traversed a particularly steep section of trail. "Should I?" Aria countered, keeping her voice equally low. "No," Alaric replied with unexpected candor. "Trust must be earned, especially after betrayal so profound. But I believe his change is genuine. The ancient circle's magic doesn't create false transformations. It reveals true nature. And if his true nature was corrupted by decades of hatred and revenge, then the corruption has been burned away, leaving what remains to heal or scar as it will. Alaric's golden eyes held wisdom born of centuries of leadership. Darius was once the most honorable wolf I knew, before grief twisted him. Whether that honor can be fully restored remains to be seen. Arya considered this as they walked, appreciating Alaric's refusal to offer platitudes. His honesty, his willingness to acknowledge complexity rather than demand simple faith, was becoming one of the qualities she most valued in him. The sun was lowering toward the horizon when the first howl reached them, distant but clear, a signal being passed from one watcher to another. The royal guard tensed immediately, several shifting forms in a blur of motion until more wolves than men surrounded Arya. "We've been spotted," Vero confirmed unnecessarily, his scarred face alert but not alarmed. "Border sentries of the eastern forests." "Friendly?" Arya asked, noting the way Alaric's posture had subtly shifted. More commanding, more regal. "Neutral," he answered. "Alpha Serena of the eastern forests maintains careful diplomacy with all factions. Her sentries will report our presence but not interfere unless we pose a direct threat." Another howl sounded, closer now, followed by another from a different direction. The messages being conveyed were unintelligible to Arya, but their effect on their party was immediate. The formation tightened, warriors moving into defensive positions with practiced ease. "That's not Eastern Forest protocol," Darius said sharply, head tilted as he listened. "Northern pack wolves, moving to intercept." Alaric's expression hardened. "Alpha Torn wasted no time," he observed grimly. The Black Guard must have reached him with news of Arya's existence. "How many?" Vero demanded, already signaling complex commands to his warriors. "At least 30, moving fast from the northwest," Darius replied, his enhanced senses picking up what even the royal guard had yet to detect. Not a diplomatic envoy. Their howls speak of capture, not greeting. Arya felt fear spike through her veins, but alongside it rose determination. She had not come this far to be captured or turned back at the first challenge. "What do we do?" "We could evade them," Vero suggested. "Take the river route through Alpha Selene's territory. Her wolves would give us safe passage." "No." Alaric's voice carried the unmistakable command of an Alpha King. "We do not skulk into the territories like thieves or cowards. If Alpha Torn wants to test us, let him do so directly. Arya's return must be witnessed, not hidden." "Then we stand and face them," Darius concluded, a hint of his old military strategy evident in his tone. "But not here on the trail where they can surround us. There's a clearing half a mile ahead, defensible, with clear sightlines." Alaric nodded in agreement. To the clearing, double time. The royal guard moved with renewed urgency, guiding Arya at a pace that challenged even her mountain-trained endurance. As they ran, she felt power stirring within her, not the dramatic surge of the ancient circle, but something steadier, more controlled. The blue glow began at her fingertips, spreading up her arms, responding to the potential threat. They reached the clearing Darius had mentioned just as shadows lengthened across the forest floor. It was smaller than the ancient circle, but similarly defensible, with a small rocky outcropping on one side providing higher ground. Varro organized the royal guard with swift efficiency, creating a perimeter while positioning archers on the rocks. Alaric guided Arya to the center of the clearing, his expression grave but resolute. "Alpha Torn will try to intimidate you," he told her quietly. "He believes in dominance above all else, but he's not a fool. He won't risk open battle with the royal guard unless provoked." "What does he want?" Arya asked, practical as always. "To assess you," Darius interjected, joining them after conferring with Vero about defensive positions. "To determine if you're truly what the prophecy foretold or merely a pretender, and if you are genuine, to either neutralize you or bend you to his purposes." Arya absorbed this, straightening her spine. "Then let him assess," she said with quiet determination. "I've spent my life being judged for what I am. This is no different." Alaric's golden eyes flashed with something like pride at her words. "It is very different," he said softly. "For now you stand not alone, but with those who recognize your true worth." Before she could respond, a chorus of howls erupted from the forest edge, closer now, surrounding the clearing. Moments later, wolves emerged from the trees, massive creatures with dark gray and black coats, muscles rippling beneath thick fur, yellow eyes gleaming with predatory focus. They formed a semicircle at the forest's edge, neither advancing nor retreating, a clear show of force. Then, from their midst stepped a man of imposing stature, tall and powerfully built, with a shock of black hair streaked with gray, and a beard that did little to hide the scars crisscrossing his face. He wore leathers adorned with wolf teeth and claws, a barbaric display that contrasted sharply with Alaric's more refined attire. "Alpha Torn," Alaric acknowledged, stepping forward with the easy confidence of one king addressing another. "You're far from your northern mountains, and you're back from the dead, Alaric," Torn replied, his voice a deep growl that matched his imposing appearance. "Rumors reached us of your demise at the hands of hunters, yet here you stand." His yellow eyes shifted to Darius, narrowing in recognition. "With interesting company, no less. The betrayer himself, restored to wolf form if my eyes don't deceive me." Darius inclined his head but made no reply, allowing Alaric to maintain control of the exchange. "The rumors of my death were premature," Alaric stated simply, as were the assumptions about Darius's permanent separation from his wolf nature. Torn's gaze finally settled on Arya, his expression shifting from wary hostility to calculated interest. "And this must be the White Witch I've heard whispers of, the supposed last Silver Moon healer." His tone made clear his skepticism. "She doesn't look like much, certainly not the salvation prophesied in the old songs." Arya met his gaze without flinching, refusing to be diminished by his assessment. The blue light emanating from her hands brightened slightly, responding to her resolve. "Alpha Torn of the Northern Packs," she acknowledged, her voice steady and clear. "I am Arya of the Silver Moon lineage. Whether I am salvation or not remains to be seen. I claim only what I am, nothing more." Her simple dignity in the face of his intimidation seemed to catch Torn off guard. He studied her more carefully, nostrils flaring as he caught her scent, eyes narrowing at the blue light that surrounded her hands. "The Council of Alphas has not been convened," he said finally, addressing Alaric again. "Yet you march through the territories with your royal guard and this woman, as if decisions have already been made. Some might see that as presumptuous, old friend." "The council will be convened," Alaric replied evenly. "As is proper when matters of importance to all 5 territories arise, we journey to the Central Plains for precisely that purpose." "And if I were to insist on assessing this supposed healer's abilities before allowing her to proceed?" Torn challenged, his massive frame tensing slightly. "The Northern Packs have suffered most from human encroachment. We have the most to lose if this is some elaborate deception." Alaric's expression remained composed, but Arya sensed the subtle shift in his stance, the Alpha King preparing to defend what was his. "You may request a demonstration," he allowed, "but you will make no demands, Torn. The time when Northern Pack Alphas dictated to the 5 territories is long past." The tension between the 2 alphas crackled almost visibly in the air. Around them, wolves on both sides shifted restlessly, sensing the dominance challenge underway. Arya stepped forward before the confrontation could escalate further. "I will demonstrate," she said clearly, "not because of demands or threats, but because proof is reasonable when asking for trust." Both alphas turned to her, momentarily united in surprise at her intervention. Alaric's eyes held concern, but also respect for her choice. Torn's expression remained calculating, but a flicker of something like approval crossed his scarred features. "What proof would satisfy you, Alpha Torn?" Arya asked directly. Torn considered for a moment, then gestured to one of his wolves, a massive black beast with a jagged scar running down its flank. At his signal, the wolf approached, limping noticeably. "Carr was injured in a battle with human poachers 3 months ago," Torn explained. "Our best healers could not fully mend the damage to his leg. The muscle was torn too severely, the tendons severed. He can no longer run as a wolf should, can no longer hunt with his brothers. If you are what you claim, heal what our healers could not." It was a clever test. A 3-month-old injury would be well past the point where conventional healing could help. The damaged tissue would be scarred, the body's natural processes already completed. Only true Silver Moon healing could address such an established injury. Arya approached the injured wolf without hesitation, kneeling beside it despite its size and fearsome appearance. Carr growled low in his throat, yellow eyes wary. "I will not harm you," she said softly, extending her hand slowly. "I only wish to see what hurts you so that I might help." The wolf studied her for a long moment, then gradually relaxed its aggressive posture, allowing her to place her hands on its injured flank. Arya closed her eyes, focusing her awareness on what lay beneath her fingers. She could feel it: the torn muscle fibers, the poorly healed tendons, the inflammation that persisted despite the passage of time. More than that, she could sense the wolf's frustration and shame at its reduced capacity, its fear of being seen as weak and therefore expendable in the harsh hierarchy of the northern packs. The blue light around her hands intensified, flowing from her fingers into the injured leg. Unlike conventional healing, which knitted together what was already there, Arya could feel herself directing a more profound restoration, causing damaged tissue to remember its original state, encouraging cellular renewal that should have been impossible. Warmth spread through her body as she worked, a sense of rightness that transcended technique. This was what she was meant for, not just mixing herbs and setting bones, but reaching deeper, to the very essence of wholeness. When she finally opened her eyes, she found a circle of wolves and men watching in stunned silence. The blue light faded gradually from her hands, but its effect remained. Carr stood without the slightest trace of his former limp, muscles rippling smoothly beneath his dark fur, testing the restored leg with increasing confidence until he was bounding in circles, displaying the perfect restoration of his former strength. Alpha Torn's expression had transformed from skepticism to something approaching religious awe. "The legends spoke truly," he said, his gruff voice uncharacteristically subdued. "The silver moon healing touch, not seen in the 5 territories for a generation." Arya rose to her feet, steadier than she had expected to be after such exertion. The fatigue that had overwhelmed her after creating the sanctuary at the ancient circle was notably absent, evidence that her control over her abilities was growing. "Are you satisfied, Alpha Torn?" Alaric asked, though the question was clearly rhetorical given the Northern Alpha's reaction. "I am convinced," Torn replied carefully, his calculating mind visibly reassessing strategies behind his yellow eyes. "Convinced enough to agree that the council must be convened." He looked directly at Arya. "The northern packs have many wounded, healer. Warriors injured defending our borders against human encroachment, civilians caught in conflicts. Would your gifts extend to them as well?" The question revealed much about Torn's priorities and offered insight into how he might be brought into alliance rather than opposition. "My gifts are for all who need them," Arya replied simply. "Wolf or human, warrior or child, healing recognizes no borders or pack divisions." Torn nodded slowly, decision made. "Then the northern packs will provide escort alongside the royal guard for the remainder of your journey. No harm will come to the Silver Moon healer in territories I influence." It was a significant concession, one that visibly surprised even Darius. The Northern Alpha was not only accepting Arya's legitimacy, but offering protection, a valuable alliance given the territories they still needed to cross. "Your support is appreciated," Alaric acknowledged formally, though Arya could see the careful assessment in his golden eyes. Torn's cooperation was welcome, but would come with expectations. Nothing in pack politics was given freely. As the 2 groups of wolves integrated their formations, establishing a combined perimeter around the clearing where they would camp for the night, Arya found herself approached by Alpha Torn once more. "You surprised me, healer," he said without preamble. "Few would face me directly as you did. Fewer still would offer help without conditions." "I am not in the business of conditions," Arya replied honestly. "Healing is not a bargaining tool. It either is or isn't needed." Torn studied her with new interest. "The 5 territories have forgotten what it meant to have Silver Moon healers among us. We've grown harder, more isolated, more suspicious in their absence." He gestured toward Carr, who was proudly displaying his restored mobility to his pack brothers. "Perhaps there is wisdom in the old ways we have neglected." With that surprisingly reflective statement, he left her, moving to confer with his warriors as they established their portion of the camp. Alaric appeared at her side, his presence a steady comfort after the tense encounter. "You've accomplished more in 5 minutes than I managed in 50 years of diplomacy," he observed with dry humor. "Alpha Torn has not offered alliance to the Central Plains since before Darius's betrayal." "I only healed an injured wolf," Arya said, though she understood the political significance of what had transpired. "You demonstrated power without threatening his authority," Alaric explained. "For an alpha like Torn, that's the perfect combination. Assistance that enhances rather than challenges his position." His golden eyes held genuine admiration. It was masterfully done, whether you intended it that way or not. I intended to help a creature in pain, Arya said simply. The politics are incidental. Alaric's lips curved in a smile that transformed his austere features, making him appear younger, less burdened. And that, Arya of the Silver Moon, is precisely why you may succeed where generations of wolf diplomacy have failed. Your priority is healing, not advantage. That purity of purpose carries its own power. The night passed peacefully, the combined forces of the Royal Guard and Northern Pack wolves creating an impenetrable perimeter around their camp. Arya slept better than she had expected, wrapped in furs provided by Alpha Torn's pack, a gesture of respect that spoke volumes about how quickly her status had changed. They resumed their journey at dawn, their numbers now nearly doubled with the addition of Torn's wolves. The Northern Alpha himself remained, traveling alongside Alaric at the front of the formation, their conversation a careful dance of politics and renewed alliance. By midday, they had crossed into the territories of the river clans, the landscape changing from dense forest to rolling hills intersected by clear, swift-flowing waterways. Arya noticed the plants changing as well, new varieties she recognized from her mother's teachings as having powerful medicinal properties. The river clans have always been closest to the old ways, Darius explained as he walked beside her, his knowledge of the territories proving valuable despite his complicated history. Alpha Selene maintains the traditions that others have abandoned. Her people still celebrate the lunar cycles, still honor the ancient covenants. Will she welcome us? Arya asked, watching as scouts from both the Royal Guard and Northern Pack ranged ahead, ensuring their path remained secure. More than welcome, Darius confirmed. Venerate might be more accurate. The river clans have kept alive the prophecy of the Silver Moon's return when others dismissed it as mere legend. As if summoned by his words, new wolves appeared on the crest of a hill ahead, sleeker than the Northern Pack wolves, with silver-gray coats that gleamed in the midday sun. They made no aggressive moves, simply watching as the procession approached. "River Clan scouts," Alaric identified, dropping back from his position with Torn to join Arya. "They will have recognized me, and likely sensed what you are. News travels quickly between packs." Sure enough, as they crested the hill, they found not a defensive formation, but what appeared to be a welcoming committee. A dozen wolves in human form stood in a semicircle, dressed in flowing garments of blue and silver, adorned with river pearls and polished stones. At their center stood a woman of striking presence, tall and graceful, with silver-streaked black hair that fell in complex braids to her waist and eyes the color of deep water. "Alpha Selene," Alaric greeted her with evident respect. The River Clan Alpha stepped forward, her movement fluid as the waters her people were named for. She touched her forehead, then heart, then extended her hand palm up, a formal greeting Arya had never seen before. "King Alaric," she responded, her voice melodic and clear. "The waters brought whispers of your return." Her gaze shifted to Arya, eyes widening slightly. "And of who accompanies you?" She immediately repeated the gesture, this time with a deeper bow. "Silver Moon Healer. The River Clans have awaited your return for a generation." The formal reception was a stark contrast to Alpha Torn's initial challenging approach. Where the Northern Pack had demanded proof, the River Clans offered immediate acceptance. "I am Arya," she introduced herself simply, uncertain of the proper protocol, but determined to maintain her own identity amidst all these formal titles. "Arya of the Silver Moon," Selene corrected gently. "Last daughter of a lineage we feared lost forever." She turned her gaze to Darius, and her expression cooled noticeably. "The betrayer walks among you, restored to wolf form, if my eyes do not deceive me." The ancient circle's magic burned away the corruption that turned him from his true nature, Alaric explained before Darius could speak. "He walks with us now as ally, not enemy." Selene's expression remained skeptical, but she offered a single nod of acknowledgement. "The waters will judge his true intentions in time." Her attention returned to Arya. "You journey to the Central Plains, to the Council of Alphas." It wasn't a question, but Arya nodded confirmation nonetheless. "Then you will accept the River Clan's hospitality for the night," Selene declared. "Our settlement lies just beyond the next bend. Food, rest, and tribute await the Silver Moon's return." The formality of her speech made Arya uncomfortable, but she recognized the political importance of accepting the offered alliance. "We would be honored," she replied, glancing at Alaric, who gave a subtle nod of approval. Alpha Torn stepped forward, his massive frame creating an interesting contrast to Celine's willowy elegance. "The Northern Packs travel with them as escort," he stated, establishing his position in this rapidly forming alliance. "The healer has proven her legitimacy. The prophecy unfolds as foretold." Selena's eyebrows rose slightly at this declaration from the normally isolationist Northern Alpha. "Indeed," she agreed, a hint of satisfaction in her tone. 3 of the 5 territories represented already. The Mountain Confederacy and Eastern Forests will not stand apart for long. As they followed the River Clan representatives toward their settlement, Arya found herself walking between Alaric and Selene, a position of honor that felt both flattering and exposing. "Your arrival was foretold in the water signs 3 days ago," Selene informed her. "Our seers watched the currents and saw silver light reflecting where no moon shone. We have been preparing for your coming." "Water signs?" Arya asked, curious despite her wariness of being cast in prophetic roles. "The river clans read meaning in the flow of water, in ripples and reflections," Alaric explained. "Their seers are remarkably accurate, though their methods are unique to their culture. The waters remember what others forget," Selene added with quiet confidence, "just as they remembered that the Silver Moon lineage would one day return to restore balance." They crested another hill, and Arya gasped involuntarily at the sight that greeted them. The River Clan settlement spread before them, not a collection of simple huts as she had expected, but a complex arrangement of beautifully crafted dwellings, built both alongside and partially over a system of converging rivers. Bridges of woven vines and polished wood connected structures built on stilts above the flowing water, while carefully tended gardens flourished on the banks. "Welcome to Riverhold," Selene said with evident pride, "central settlement of the river clans and sacred site of the first covenant between wolves and healers." As they descended toward the settlement, Arya noticed the inhabitants emerging from their dwellings, lining the pathways. Unlike the Northern Pack with their emphasis on warrior culture, the River Clan members appeared more diverse, elders and children among them, all dressed in the same flowing garments of blue and silver. When they caught sight of Arya, a murmur ran through the gathered crowd. Then, one by one, they knelt, heads bowed in a gesture of reverence that made her profoundly uncomfortable. "They honor what you represent," Alaric murmured, sensing her discomfort. "The return of balance after a generation of discord." "I haven't done anything to earn such honor," Arya whispered back. "You exist," Selene replied, overhearing their exchange. "After the Great Purge, after the deliberate extermination of your lineage, you survived, you returned. For those who kept faith with the old ways, that alone is worthy of reverence." The implications of Selene's words settled heavily on Arya's shoulders. These people had maintained hope for a generation, waiting for something they had no guarantee would ever come to pass. The weight of their expectations, their belief in what she represented, was almost more daunting than Alpha Torn's initial hostility had been. They were led to a central structure built over the confluence of 3 rivers, its wooden walls adorned with intricate carvings of wolves, healers, and flowing water. Inside, a feast had been prepared. River fish, wild game, fruits and vegetables, unlike any Arya had seen in her mountain home. As they ate, Selene shared information about movements throughout the territories, pack politics, shifting alliances, rumors of unrest. It became clear that the River Clan Alpha maintained the most comprehensive intelligence network among the 5 territories, her people's traders and travelers, bringing news from every corner of the wolf domains. "The Eastern Forests remain neutral for now," she informed them. "Alpha Serena waits to see which way the currents flow before committing her resources. The Mountain Confederacy under Alpha Caden is more concerning. They have long allied with the Central Plains, but recent disputes over territory have strained relations." "Caden is young, ambitious," Torn added between bites of roasted venison. "He sees himself as the future of the 5 territories. Your return challenges his vision of strength through dominance." "He will need to adapt," Alaric stated simply. "The prophecy unfolds whether he approves or not." As the meal concluded, Selene rose, gesturing for Arya to follow. "There is something you must see," she said, leading Arya to a small antechamber off the main hall. The others remained behind, recognizing this as a private exchange between Healer and Alpha. The chamber was simple but beautiful, its walls lined with shelves containing countless small bottles, each filled with water that somehow caught and reflected light in different hues. "River memories," Celine explained, seeing Arya's curious gaze. "Water that has witnessed significant events, collected and preserved by generations of RiverClan seers." She selected a bottle containing water that seemed to glow with faint silver luminescence. "This was collected the night the last known Silver Moon healer was killed in the Great Purge," she said solemnly. "The rivers ran silver that night, mourning their protectors." Arya stared at the bottle, a connection to her slaughtered lineage that seemed both precious and terrible. "My mother never spoke of the Great Purge," she said quietly, though she must have survived it. "Some escaped," Celine confirmed. "Scattered, hidden, changing their names and concealing their gifts. Your mother was wise to protect you with silence." She returned the bottle to its shelf and selected another, this one containing water that shifted between blue and gold as the light struck it. "This was collected 3 nights ago, when you renewed the ancient covenant at the circle. The rivers sensed the restoration of balance beginning." She placed the bottle in Arya's hands. "The river clans would ask a boon of the Silver Moon healer," she said formally, "one in keeping with the old covenants." Arya held the bottle carefully, aware of its significance to Celine's people. "What boon?" "Restoration of our primary sanctuary," Celine replied. "When the Silver Moon lineage was purged, the sanctuaries they maintained fell dormant. Our most sacred site lies beneath this very structure, at the convergence of 3 rivers. Once it provided healing to all who sought it, wolf and human alike. Now it sleeps, waiting for a Silver Moon touch to reawaken it." The request was significant. Not a simple healing like Kar's leg, but the restoration of an ancient magical site. Yet Arya found herself nodding without hesitation. This was part of her heritage, part of the legacy she was only beginning to understand. "I will try," she promised, "though I cannot guarantee success. My understanding of my abilities is still developing." Celine's expression softened. "That you are willing to try is honor enough," she said. "The sanctuary has waited a generation. It can guide you if you open yourself to its memories." She led Arya down a spiral staircase carved directly into living stone, descending below the level of the rivers that surrounded the structure. The air grew cooler, heavy with moisture and something else, a sense of age, of patience, of slumbering power. They emerged into a circular chamber where the 3 rivers converged beneath a dome of crystal that allowed filtered light to illuminate the space. In the center stood a raised platform of smooth stone, similar to the altar at the ancient circle, but more elaborate, with channels carved into its surface that once would have guided water across its face. "The confluence," Celine named it with reverence. Once the waters that met here carried healing to every corner of the River Clan territories. Wolves and humans alike came to receive the blessing of Silver Moon healers who maintained this sanctuary. Arya approached the stone platform, feeling the dormant power within it calling to her own abilities. This was older than the ancient circle, more complex in its design, created for sustained healing rather than momentary covenant. Without being instructed, she placed her hands on the cool stone surface. Immediately, blue light flowed from her fingers, following the carved channels, illuminating patterns hidden by centuries of disuse. The sensation was different from her previous experiences with her power, not the urgent protection of the ancient circle or the focused healing of Kar's injury, but something deeper, more fundamental. She felt as if she were connecting not just with the stone beneath her hands, but with the rivers themselves, with the water cycle that sustained all life, with patterns of energy that flowed through earth and air and living beings alike. The blue light spread from the platform, following the 3 rivers outward in different directions. Arya sensed rather than saw the light traveling along waterways, restoring connections severed decades ago when the last Silver Moon healer had fallen. A profound sense of rightness filled her, as if she were correcting something long out of balance. This was what her lineage had been born to do, not just heal individual wounds, but maintain the greater harmony between all living things. When she finally removed her hands from the stone, the entire chamber glowed with soft blue light. The water flowing through the converging rivers had changed, now carrying luminescent particles that caught and reflected the light in hypnotic patterns. "The sanctuary awakens," Celine whispered, awe evident in her voice. After a generation of silence, the healing waters flow once more. Arya felt different, not drained as she had expected, but somehow more connected, as if the rivers themselves now extended her awareness beyond her physical body. She could sense the water flowing outward, carrying the sanctuary's influence throughout the River Clan territories and beyond. "What happens now?" she asked, watching the glowing waters swirl in mesmerizing patterns. "Now the waters carry healing once more," Celine explained. "Any creature, wolf or human, who drinks from or bathes in these rivers will receive healing appropriate to their need. Minor wounds for most, deeper restoration for those who seek the confluence directly." Her eyes shone with genuine emotion. "You have restored a cornerstone of our culture, Arya of the Silver Moon. The river clans will be forever in your debt." When they returned to the main hall, Arya found Alaric in deep discussion with Alpha Torn, while Darius stood somewhat apart, observing with the careful neutrality of one still uncertain of his place. All three looked up at their entrance, conversation halting as they noted the subtle change in Arya's appearance, the faint blue luminescence that seemed to flow beneath her pale skin, the new confidence in her bearing. "The sanctuary is restored," Celine announced formally. "The healing waters flow once more throughout our territories." Alaric's golden eyes found Arya's, pride, and something deeper evident in his gaze. "You continue to exceed all expectations," he said simply. Torn looked impressed despite himself, while Darius studied her with new intensity, as if truly seeing her potential for the first time. "The River Clans pledge formal alliance," Celine declared, addressing Alaric but including Arya in her gaze. "Our seers, our warriors, our resources stand with the Silver Moon Healer and the Wolf King. When you present yourselves to the Council of Alphas, we stand with you." Combined with the Northern Pact's earlier pledge, this declaration meant 3 of the 5 territories now stood aligned, a political shift not seen in generations. Alaric acknowledged the pledge with formal gratitude, but Arya could see the strategic significance registered in his eyes. The balance of power was shifting rapidly, all because of her presence. That night, as she prepared for sleep in the private chamber provided by her River Clan hosts, Arya found herself reflecting on how dramatically her life had changed in the space of a few days. From isolated healer to political linchpin, from solitary existence to the center of pack diplomacy. A soft knock at her door interrupted her thoughts. She opened it to find Alaric standing there, his silver-white hair loose around his shoulders, his golden eyes reflecting the soft lamplight. "May I enter?" he asked formally, respecting her privacy despite his rank. Arya nodded, stepping back to allow him inside. The chamber suddenly seemed smaller with his powerful presence filling it. "You've accomplished more in 3 days than diplomatic missions have achieved in decades," he said without preamble. "The Northern Pacts and River Clans haven't stood together since before the Great Purge." "I only did what seemed right," Arya replied honestly. "Healed an injured wolf, restored a sanctuary. The politics are incidental. Yet those incidental actions have reshaped the future of the 5 territories." Alaric's expression was serious but warm. "Tomorrow we enter the Central Plains, my direct domain. The day after, the Council of Alphas will convene. You should be prepared for what that means." "More tests of my abilities?" Arya guessed. "More territorial posturing?" "That and questions about us," Alaric said carefully. "About the nature of our partnership." The word hung between them, laden with unspoken significance. Arya felt heat rise to her cheeks, but she met his gaze steadily. "What will you tell them? Will you—" "The truth," he replied simply. "That we are bound by prophecy and common purpose, that the specifics of our personal relationship remain private, as is our right." "And if they demand more concrete definitions?" Arya pressed, needing to understand exactly what she was walking into. Alaric moved closer, not crowding her, but eliminating the formal distance between them. "Pack law recognizes many forms of bonds," he explained. "Political alliances, blood oaths, territorial pacts. But the strongest bond, the one that cannot be broken or contested, is that between Alpha and Luna, true mates recognized by the moon goddess herself." The implication was clear. "And they will expect that between us," Arya concluded. "Many will, yes. The prophecy speaks of the strongest Alpha and the last Silver Moon Healer restoring balance together. In wolf culture, that implies a mate bond." His golden eyes held hers with unwavering intensity. But I meant what I said before. We will not be rushed into declarations to satisfy tradition. What grows between us deserves the dignity of its own time, its own development. Arya felt something shift within her at his words, respect for his restraint, gratitude for his understanding, and beneath it all, the undeniable pull she had felt toward him from the moment their eyes first met in the forest. "And what if," she began, then hesitated, gathering her courage, "what if I am coming to believe that the prophecy was right about this as well? That what binds us is more than circumstance or common purpose?" Alaric's breath caught, the only sign that her words had affected his careful composure. "Then we would face that truth together," he said softly, "with the same courage you've shown in facing everything else these past days." He reached out slowly, giving her every opportunity to withdraw, and when she didn't, he gently took her hand in his. Blue light sparked between them immediately, more intense than before, a visible manifestation of the connection they both felt. "I have lived centuries," he said, his deep voice resonant with emotion long contained. "I have known duty, purpose, responsibility, but never this sense of recognition, as if my soul has found its missing half." The simple honesty of his declaration touched Arya more deeply than flowery words ever could have. This powerful king, this legendary alpha who had ruled for generations, standing before her with his heart exposed, it humbled and exalted her in equal measure. "I barely know you," she whispered, echoing her words from days before. "Yet I feel as if I've always known you." "Perhaps you have," Alaric replied, his free hand rising to gently trace the curve of her cheek. "Perhaps we have been moving toward this moment across lifetimes." The blue light surrounding their joined hands intensified, spreading up their arms, creating a luminous cocoon around them both. Arya felt her power responding to his proximity in ways both new and somehow familiar, as if completing a circuit long interrupted. When his lips finally met hers, it felt like coming home to a place she'd never been. The kiss was gentle at first, respectful, a question rather than a demand. But as she responded, moving closer into his embrace, it deepened into something more profound, a recognition, a promise, a covenant as binding as any blood oath. The blue light flared brilliantly around them, then settled into a steady glow that seemed to sink beneath their skin, joining them at some level beyond physical touch. When they finally drew apart, both breathing unsteadily, Arya could feel something new between them, a bond that transcended the physical, a connection at the level of spirit. "The mate bond," Alaric whispered, awe in his voice, "forming already, though not yet complete." "Is this normal?" Arya asked, trying to understand the significance of what she was experiencing. Alaric's laugh was soft, warm with genuine emotion. "There is nothing normal about any of this, Arya of the Silver Moon. What forms between us is as rare as your lineage, as ancient as the Wolf King's crown. It is a bond written in prophecy, but realized through choice." His golden eyes held hers, filled with a devotion that took her breath away. "My choice, and yours." The implications settled over Arya like a mantle, both burden and blessing. To be bound to this man, this king, was to step fully into the role destiny had prepared for her, to accept not just her healing gifts, but her place in the grand design that had preserved her bloodline when all others of her kind had perished. "I choose you," she said simply, the words feeling like a vow more binding than any formal ceremony. "Whatever comes next, we face it together." Alaric's smile transformed his features, making him appear younger, unburdened, if only for a moment. He pressed his forehead to hers, an intimate gesture that felt more wolf than human. "Together," he affirmed. When he finally left her chamber, Arya felt changed, not just by the kiss or the nascent bond forming between them, but by her own decision to embrace rather than resist what destiny had placed before her. 5 years she had hidden in the mountains, nursing wounds of rejection and loss. Now she stepped willingly into a role larger than she had ever imagined, with a partner she had never expected to find. Tomorrow they would enter the Central Plains, the heart of Alaric's domain. The day after, they would face the Council of Alphas, where the true test of their alliance would begin. Political forces would align for and against them. Ancient grudges and ambitions would surface. Challenges would be issued and met. But for the first time since fire had claimed her childhood home, Arya did not face the future alone. The last Silver Moon healer had found her alpha, her protector, her equal. Whether prophecy or choice had brought them together no longer seemed relevant. What mattered was the path ahead, and the promise of dawn bringing new possibilities. For her, for Alaric, for the balance their union might restore to a world long fractured by hatred and fear. Outside her window, the rivers flowed with renewed purpose, carrying healing waters to territories long deprived of their blessing. The sanctuary beneath Riverhold pulsed with awakened power, a beacon calling to those in need. And in the night sky above, the moon shone down on it all, not silver, but full and golden, watching over her children as they took the first steps toward healing wounds centuries old. The silence that had been Arya's companion for 5 years was broken now, replaced by the flowing of rivers, the soft breathing of wolves, the quiet promise of an alpha's devotion, and the whispered hope of a future where difference was not weakness, but strength, where wounds ancient and new might finally begin to heal.